showing, which
Yeah.
a long way round, but essentially a bit like Putin and what he's watching at the moment with the Europeans and the Americans infighting.
Dropped out for a
A
minute
little
there.
bit different with this.
For sure.
I think Beijing will be very nervous about this outreach of Trump to Putin and what that means for them.
But James,
But
to
it seems
tie
very
back
careful
into-
in how it's going to approach it. It doesn't want to,
No, I just to elaborate on that, because I think to tie it into everything that we've spoken about this evening, China is part of the international system. It's not, well, what the West likes to coin as rogue states of the Russians, the North Koreans, the Iranians, the Cubans, or whatever, right? China is very much in the economic system, and therefore, sort of when The Economist is putting the 4 heads of state on their cover and saying the new autocratic axis, sort of it's a bit because China is obviously like that, but they don't want the Russians and the North Koreans signing strategic partnerships because it puts more spotlight on the Eastern Asia theater, where they don't want it. They want it to be on Ukraine, on Africa, on other parts, because they're happy to work in the background. And the other thing that I think is also very symbolic of this is that the Chinese are really good at long-termism in the way that the West isn't, at least because we have these, talk about it, democratic cycles, but because we have the democratic cycles, it doesn't allow us to have consistency across policymaking. And therefore, that is harder to sort of deal with in the West in terms of all the opinions and stuff. The Chinese, they just set, and they're very good at just setting. And as you say, the reapproachment with India is a fascinating development. But I still wonder how far it goes. And this is the last point before I hand it back to you both, which is that the Chinese don't have an alliance network. People want to do business. My Indian guest said it very bluntly. People want to do business with China, but they don't trust China, which I think is Again, I'm not trying to be anti-China or something too much, but I mean, it's kind of true. How many defense pacts, how many strategic partners, how many alliances, joint declarations of alliance are there with China? I don't know any. The Americans have tons, right? The biggest strategical shift that I can remember of China in recent memory was the defense pact that they signed with the Solomon Islands about 2 years ago. Okay. How much have the Americans done in that? And then again, I'm saying that could all blow up after what Trump's doing. But you know what I mean? I think there's so much here that China has all that capacity, but they don't seem to be able to export it very well to bring people closer to their inner circle. I don't know.
Well, I can tell you, at least as far as the here in Central Asia, the perception of China is that they come with money and they come with economic agreements, but there's not really that sense of friendship that you would find. So it's very close to what you were saying, is that we'll do business with China, but we don't trust China. Because when China agrees to economic agreements with Central Asian countries, and Tajikistan is a really good example of this, China will import its own workers. They'll import their own planners, their own engineers. This is not a bilateral relation. This is Tajikistan effectively ceding territory over to some business venture in China for them to control all on their own. And so when Central Asian countries like Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, the 3 big ones are called into question here, I mean, it's ultimately Russia or China. The United States has always been a third wheel, a Johnny-come-lately, a cosmetic person within the major capitals. And at the end of the day, the understanding is that, if we can get China to ally with the United States against Russia, or get Russia to side with the United States or the West against China.
You ready to go to that?
I mean, I really don't know what experts are, why they would call themselves that, because first of all, Russia and China get along phenomenally well. But secondly, this understanding within this area of the former Soviet Union is that the United States does provide a significant amount of soft power as far as consumerism and pop culture. But China does all of the hard industry, the hard industrial, the hard construction. And at the end of the day, Russia is always there to be the bigger brother to kind of blunt that Chinese element to it. Central Asians will still trust Russians more than they trust the Chinese. And it might be Soviet era legacies. It might be the fact that there is a large amount of migrant labor work within the stands, within Russia. But to your point, right, China is sort of seen as this country that has its own interests and makes a lot of political elites in these countries rich, but it doesn't do much for furthering the welfare of the general population. I can tell you this much, is that China's economic influence is exponentially bigger than that of the United States, but English next to Russian is the language that everybody is learning to speak. Very few people are studying Mandarin.
Interesting. All right. Well, I mean, we have, I think, skittered across the globe as we always do.
Blimey.
I think it's quite an achievement amongst us three that I'm just impressed by how much we all know, to be honest with you. But I'm not answering for myself, but these two gentlemen. I guess maybe we should. Yeah, exactly. Michael, we're not sure about. But,
I mean, look, there's a lot of information, but unfortunately, I think we are dealing with an incredibly confusing situation. I mean, there's lots of ifs, whys, buts that I think this evening's conversation hopefully has raised, and there will be decision makers and strategic thinkers in the foreign ministry desperately trying to play through all of this as well. I mean, so hopefully if people say, well, we haven't provided answers, well,
fuck yourself.
Well, we're just three YouTubers. What do we know? I'm kidding. We know lots. I think we know.
Tune in next week.
Yeah, right.
That's what I was going to do, actually. I was just bringing up your channel, Mr. Professor James Kalinzi. So hang on, everybody. But yeah, so I don't know. Maybe where should we leave it? I guess. What would you encourage viewers from your channel, from either of our channels, to watch out for? Maybe Michael, if we start with you, and then James will come to you, and I'll share each person's respective channel whilst you share your final thoughts.
I mean, all I can say is, in addition to ditto for what James had just said, as soon as there is something else that comes out of either Russia's Ministry of Foreign Affairs or the Kremlin, I will post it on my YouTube channel. I was a bit busy this past week with statements from Lavrov, as well as an interview that Putin had given to a couple of journalists. No official statement just yet regarding when Trump and Putin will meet. I do believe, if the radio chatter is correct, that Trump was invited to Moscow for the 80th anniversary of Victory Day, which would be a major diplomatic and symbolic presence within the country. I'm sure that critics are going to be beside themselves that he would be standing next to Putin. But if that is the time that they finally meet, I would be it's May, it's the end of the semester, just before papers are being graded, so I'll be busy translating videos. There's anything coming. Yeah.
But as you can see, everybody, so Michael does do incredible work.
Fantastic in sort of getting those.
But he takes, it's not just a sort of, he had subtitles, he verbatim translates the speeches and important commentary being made in Russia and sort of Eurasia or former Soviet states, which I think is incredibly important, because the West can sort of interpret what's being on, but if you want a verbatim what's being actually said, I think it's incredibly important. And you can see obviously how many times my face has been, well, it's literally just lives of me and Michael and Jay. So there you go. His entire live feed is going to be us three reconvening every week. But James, any final thoughts from you?
No, I mean, well, apart from to say that obviously this is the big developments we think this week are going to be the Macron and Starmer, for all the reasons we discussed. What is it that they can offer? How could they potentially walk Trump back from this?
So weird. I played Juggernaut like what?
And it's
going
to be
I already feel small.
Reading the readouts and how that comes across. Big task for them both. And as you pointed out, the results of the German elections and where that's going to go is also going to be very, very important in all of this. But we're dealing with Trump here, the great unknowns that are going to be thrown at us. Yeah. No, certainly not having boring times at the moment, but this is worrying. Not.
Oh, we have talking about but and as you can see, there is a lot of times foreign aid mistake. You've done so many different things, covering the Rwanda land grab. I think that's an extremely important topical one that I want to do something myself on as well.
Yes, I mean, for anyone who doesn't know how I'm approaching things, so basically what I'm trying to do is, even when I talk about Trump, I try and hang it on a bigger issue. So, for example, closing down USAID or USAID was also talking about the importance of USAID and aid as a whole in the international system and things. So I do try and make sure that it's not just, what has Trump said now and just immediate reaction to it, but actually trying to give a little bit more of a historical background. But I don't want to be all Trump all the time. There's a big wide world out there, and there's a lot of other issues which really deserve attention. So, bit of a plug this week, I was looking at Bougainville, which is a territory that most people aren't aware of. If I were a betting man, I'd say it's probably the best chance of being the next UN member, and it's now the longest time in UN history since it's had a new member. The last country to join was South Sudan in 2011. But that's run into some very interesting problems, and there is actually a China dimension in that, but also the Cameroon, South Cameroon situation as well, a tragedy in Africa that's been going on.
I hate that they can interrupt me.
Very few people know about. So these are some of the things that, absolutely, we shouldn't lose sight that there's a lot of other important issues which are affecting people's lives taking place on this planet.
Yeah, I know. I strongly resonate with that last sentiment there, James. As someone who's lived in Africa for over 2 years, I can tell you that Africa deserves more. And guys, I mean, last comments from me, I guess I would say, my channel, I do focus on Ukraine a lot. I do interview people, but I do increasingly do some of my own things. I made one on the Trump tariffs with my face seemingly in the camera, very close up there. But I try to bring a slightly different approach to maybe Michael and James in that, I want to believe in multilateralism. I want to believe in the international order as it is, but I also think that we are facing a systemic set of changes, and that what we have become accustomed to, particularly in the past 30 years, let alone 80 years, is changing. Multipolarity is here, and if the West wants to continue to be a big player, or just the United States or Europe more specifically, let's just focus on Europe actually, we need to adapt. Like globalization has proven that as a nation state, you have to either change, adapt, or die. Countries need to, with the growing and changing security order, if that makes sense, right? There are many ways that Europe can go. It can flitter out, as I've seen in the comments. Many people believe Europe is already spent and an irrelevant entity. Others think that Europe is still the place to be because of so many things to do with history, culture, and so on. I'm somewhere in the middle. I think Europe has a incredibly important set of decisions to make, and if we don't get it right and remain proactive and reject complacency and negligence, then we're going to only suffer further. Brexit has taught us the attempts of smaller nations to go off on our own, and it doesn't really work out. We're not a great power unless we work together, which is why Europe is in this rather unique situation. And you can see, as I made the same point a week ago with Africa, some of the biggest offenders of the international order are actually those that were created by it in the post-World War II era. And the Europeans, as you can argue, one of the biggest creators of the international system, now have to accept that they're no longer the ones pulling the strings and pushing the in the driver's seat. And we'll reconvene maybe in a week or not. I'll see if James and Michael have the capacity for that. But that's it from me, everybody. And from James and Michael, thank you so much for joining as always. 2 hours, 12 minutes. I think that is a record for both of us.
I think that is. I think that is a record.
Enough. I got to prepare for tomorro's lecture. So yeah,
I've got to go and have
I've
a drink.
got kids that need to be.
Yeah,
I have none of that. I'm a bachelor. I don't know what you're talking about. But thank you very much, everyone. Do subscribe to these guys' channels and do support us. And actually, last shout out for me. Thank you very much for everyone who supported me. 50,000 subscribers. That's very exciting.
Yes, well done.
Once again.
Yes.
But anyway, everyone, speak soon, and hopefully with some more positive news. See you on the flip side. Bye-bye.
Ciao.
Bye there.
The other night, I lay awake in my bed, doom scrolling through X and Instagram as one does,
Gross,
when I saw a series of viral videos on the PKM that made me unironically hula out loud. Because I saw the PKM machine gun attached to flying drones, unmanned remote-controlled RC cars, and even a next-generation PKZ variant. In this episode, I want to take a look at the future of one of history's favorite machine guns. The first futuristic application we're going to look at is the PKM in drone warfare. This viral video shows the weapon firing at enemy trench positions, which has added a whole new dimension to small unit tactics. But it's hard to remember that it was only in November of 2024, not that long ago, that the first ever documented use of a rifle on a drone used in combat in the history of God's good Earth was confirmed. And now we're moving on to belt feds.
I killed him, I guess. I must have hit him.
The current practical tactical applications of a drone machine gun is clear to me. You could use it for suppressing fire, because this thing does have limitations. It doesn't seem to have pinpoint accuracy, even though the PKM isn't that bad usually when it comes to accuracy. You don't need an accurate PKM fire against an enemy trench. You just need to pepper the region. That would be good enough. And then maybe you could maneuver a fire team element on the enemy. It's absolutely nuts that we have a drone powerful enough to handle a medium machine gun cartridge. The PKM fires that full-powered 7.62 by 54R cartridge. It is a spicy meatball. It's 19 foot-pounds of recoil energy, so it's like getting a strong shove every time it's fired. It uses the DJI Agris T30 agricultural drone. Some guy originally built it thinking that it would help spray pesticides over 40 acres of crop fields and help feed humanity. Instead, I pressed it again! But before we get into that, the only way this video is possible is thanks to Odoo. Odoo prides itself on the motto, unity makes creative strength. And through its robust, seemingly never-ending suite of business management applications, its ability to unite with my creative workflow, for one, has proven to strengthen pretty much every aspect of my day-to-day operations. And today, I want to focus mainly on my favorite part of the platform, and what I think really differentiates it from a lot of other competitors out there, its user interface. No matter whether you're using just one application or you have many applications across multiple businesses in different cities,
I used my brain that time and I said, wait, don't press it. I almost
exactly what you want to see is as easy as a touch of the button, and it's completely customizable. That means you can collate and function the right data at the right time, which I've found to drastically decrease the amount of time that I spend on things like balancing budgets, authorizing payroll, and checking sales trends. So if you're looking for a simple and easy to use software platform for business management, be sure to check out odoo.com. The first application is free for life. You don't even need a credit card. The drone's entire payload is about 85 pounds, which is perfect because the PKM is super light. In fact, that's one of its main claims to fame. It's about 16.5 pounds usually, so she's a feather, relatively speaking, compared to other similar weapon systems. So the drone has a powerful stabilization system, and it's made of high-strength materials that can absorb the shock without being thrown off balance too much. My first thought was, of course, that's a PKM on a drone. Why wouldn't that happen? Actually, it's weird I haven't seen that yet. Another interesting question raised by this is exactly how accurate that PKM will be strapped up there. Here's what you need to know about PKM accuracy. With small bursts, you might be able to hit within 2 to 4 inches at 100 meters if you're a real crack shot, if you're a real PKM Chadley. However, if you're standing up unsupported and laying down that full auto from the hip like Arnold, you might hit like over a 10-minute of angle, aka nothing. And that's what I would imagine the case would be for the current iteration of flying drones, but it's only going to get better. I don't know why I said that like I'm looking forward to flying drones shooting everything. You might be able to hit the broadside of an Eastern European barn with it, but remember, according to ArmyRecognition.com, these modifications required a huge overhaul of the drone's original software and hardware. Basically, programmers had to reconfigure it to work for target acquisition, and tracking the enemy instead of crop dusting. The only thing I don't understand is how it manages that spent ammo, because one of the first things I noticed when firing the PKM is that its spent links hang out one end and drag behind you everywhere you go. You gotta be careful not to trip over the links, because they're what's called the non-disintegrating links. So for a drone, it would basically be like having a long spent ammo dazzler dragging out the back like toilet paper stuck on your shoe. You don't want that getting caught in a drone propeller. That would be an embarrassment for any drone operator.
This is kind of that weird thing where it's got the firepower of a 240, but you can use it in a squad role because it's more maneuverable. You can keep it up.
The way in the U.S. Army, the way it works is there's 4 squads. The 4th squad is issued 2 of these. And then you got 2 AG gunners for it. With the PKM, you could run it differently, because that means you could put it into your all 4 squads could have a PKM. Like you were saying, it doesn't have to be like this dedicated element.
The second futuristic application of the PKM shows that flying drones won't be the only thing to trigger your PTSD. It'll also be RC cars. There are nightmare beings right here on the ground living amongst us mortals. You got 2 PKs on a robot there. That clip came from early in the war. But see how it's progressed since then? Troops are now conducting entirely unmanned ground assaults with tiny ground drones that have tracks and treads and are controlled remotely from far away. They're basically RC cars with PKM machine guns. I mean, it's come a long way since the start of the war. I remember when I was a kid, I'd play around with RC cars, and I never thought I'd use that skill to murk people, but here we are. But the reason I actually like the PKM for drone combat is because of another aspect that we haven't dived too deeply into yet, which is the legendary reliability. Okay, so the PKM is famously rugged, operates in harsh conditions, and has a simple, easy to maintain design. To me, that makes it ideal for prolonged ground drone combat use because it has minimal upkeep. You don't want to have to worry about constantly maintaining it. Oh, ooh. PK on your drone, I love that for you. Since its invention in the 1960s, over 1 million PKMs have been produced and reigned all over the world. It's seen combat everywhere from Afghanistan to both sides of the war in Ukraine, even to American personnel who managed to get their hands on it. Many regular Joes believe that the PKM machine gun is one of the greatest general purpose machine guns ever put into wide-scale use by any military.
I always get a kick out of this. When you look at it, it's the whole upside down AK thing. So they literally took the AK, the reliability and everything, scaled it up and then flipped it upside down.
Well, look at that clip. Look how it's paired with a thermal optic remote firing system. This is the stuff of dystopian nightmares, and I absolutely love it. Once they hook it up to ChatGPT or DeepSeek or whatever you like, us humans are definitely going to be cooked.
And I think you noticed when we were walking through the brush here, walking on kind of staggered column patrol, it's easy to walk with it. It kind of works with you. When you're working in a squad and you got other guys that got rifles, like how we were doing, you had a smaller rifle, it's easier to keep up with the rest of the team then. Because really, you're only as fast as your slowest guy. So if you're out there with a PKM, you're a little bit quicker. You're able to move a little bit faster, and your whole squad then is more mobile.
The third futuristic application of the PKM shows how reliable old technology can be paired with new systems in unexpected ways. What in God's good name am I looking at, and why can't I look away? The PK series was bolted onto the back of a Cybertruck in August of 2024. We saw the 12.7 mil version of the PK slapped on top of Cybertrucks owned by Ramzan Kadyrov. The story went viral, and it resonates with us because we're seeing cutting-edge, futuristic technology combined with historic, rugged technology like this machine gun. It's a jarring thing to see, the Cybertruck paired with a PK. It's like when you put two things together that definitely shouldn't, like chicken and waffles, they end up complementing each other somehow. So Ramzan Kadyrov runs the Chechen Republic, and he's a close ally of Putin. He claims to have sent 10,000 soldiers to fight in the war in Ukraine. He claims to have deployed the Cybertrucks with the PK to fight. This futuristic application, I think, is also not yet practical. Yes, the Cybertruck is said to have some level of armor. It's got 3mm thick 301 stainless steel. Tesla claims the Cybertruck can stop 9mm 22 rounds. Either way, the fact that the gunner is exposed in the back is a little bit more concerning to me. It would be interesting, I think, to see a remote controlled PK on top with a thermal camera that hooks up to that internal screen in the front of the... Okay, wait a second. I need to stop. I should not be giving them ideas. If we keep doom scrolling, we can see the fourth futuristic application of the PK, which is called the Next Generation PKZ. Russia still has thousands of the PKM on the front lines. On the Ukrainian side, the PKM is still standard issue, serving alongside Western machine guns that have been donated, like the M240, which might have a slight advantage in your fixed positions because you can barrel swap, and because the Bravo version, it's big. It's like Cloud's Buster Sword from Final Fantasy. It's like this. Ching! Ching! I hope my wife never watches any of these videos. I went to Arizona, got the unique opportunity to fire 2 different versions of the PK with my buddy Greg from Spartan 117 GW.
So it's a little bit more manageable from those other positions, from the shoulder, you know, from the hip, or obviously like just deploying in different positions. But any kind of like dismounted, moving and shooting, it's significantly easier, just better balanced than the 240.
So one of the first things that jumped out to me personally,
Can't hear
using
you.
a weapon that I liked, is that you can carry it at the low ready. You can actually have it up with the stock up here and feel like you can operate this thing indoors. Whereas the 240, you don't want to walk into a building with that and try to clear it.
My understanding is that PKP is supposed to be better for those prolonged engagements. By all accounts, this machine gun is living up to its reputation in the traditional role, as well as a few new ones. So what about that mysterious PKZ? What's she all about? Why'd she make me want a hua? It's supposed to replace the older PKs. It weighs approximately only 7 kilograms.
That is
and
an
measuring at
XCOM gun if I've
850
ever
millimeters
seen
in
one.
length, it's a lot lighter and more compact than its predecessors.
That literally
That's
looks like the XCOM
main
machine
takeaway.
gun.
It enhances your maneuverability for assault units. It's like only 15 pounds. It'd be great for assaults, which is something that Russian troops are currently doing a lot of on foot. It's all about being good in confined spaces. We saw America did something similar with their paratrooper version of the SAW, and then there's lighter weight, I think, Lima version of 240. The theme of small arms procurement nowadays is less is more, and that's very important for trench warfare. All that said, the PKM isn't perfect, does have some drawbacks. When I fired it, the thing kept spitting hot brass into my arm, and that sucks dick, and not in a good way. Also, the Soviets wanted the PKM to be able to use the same belts of ammo used by the older MGs still in service, like the Maxim gun or the RP-46. While this made sense from an army logistics standpoint, it also meant that the gun was stuck using belt with non-disintegrating links that would dangle off the left side as it chews through the belt. It's not so much of a problem, but as I fired it more and more, the belt gets fed through. It can snag or get tangled on things pretty easily, especially if you're assaulting forward, which I think that's the theme of today. This weapon is for offensive pushes. I know I said reliability was a huge factor, but here's something that someone disagrees with that. Ron Chaney of Battlefield Vegas gun range, he had this to say about their rental collection, quote, "Our 240s have held up better than the PKMs. We've lost 2 front trunnions and 3 rear trunnions on PKMs, but have never experienced any cracking or breaking of 240 receivers. Also, we've only lost 1 operational rod on the M240 as compared to at least 4 on the PKM. That being said, if I was a door kicker and humped them around, I'd take the PKM." End quote. The weapon itself has come a long way, right? The PK started as this wooden stock type from the 1960s variant. The one I test fired was the variant of the PK from the olden days, and then the PKM that's been upgraded with some high-speed rail systems added to it for mounting your sweet high-speed attachments. The scope on it was, well, I'll say it was pretty dang baller. This version, the PKM, is given a slightly heavier air-cooled barrel that you can't swap out in the middle of firing. So technically it doesn't need barrel swapping, which is something that any machine gunner who's watching this video right now knows that's one of the most important skills and tasks that you have to learn. So after you're firing sustained shots for like a minute straight and you're going cyclic, you need to stop at that point. You need to chill out, because otherwise you're going to warp that barrel from all the heat and you're going to destroy it. It's going to have a nice curve in it. But all that aside, I've heard that some soldiers actually prefer to have the ability to swap barrels because of that sheer volume of fire that it's subjugated to. For many years though, the main limiting factor wasn't the barrel. No one really complained about that. It was about the optics. The original version, it was hard to throw optics and attachments on. So when it comes to combat performance, soldiers definitely say that they love the PKM, especially for things like defending trenches, defending concrete bunkers, but more than that, it excels at assaults and offensive maneuvers. To put it simply, as an average infantryman, the PKM, she handles well. They call it ergonomics, but I call it quality of life improvements because I have trouble pronouncing ergonomics. Ergonomics, because I think the PKM is absolutely amazing and I have nothing but respect for it, and my respect is only increased after I got hands-on with it. I think the layout of the PKM has clearly inspired some of the latest GMPGs, general purpose machine guns, that we're seeing in the United States, like the XM250. The PKM, I found that I could hold the system kind of like a rifle. In general, the system's easier to walk with on patrol, to run around with, compared to original versions of the M240, like the M240 Bravo. There's something I did find mildly infuriating though. And the thing was, when you fired it, the shells are ejected, hot spent shell casing straight into your arms. I earned a couple of burn marks for not being careful. But if you're wearing a long sleeve uniform or something, and you're not trying to show off how jacked you are, it shouldn't be an issue. There's also another way of firing it with your hand at the top that, prevents you from getting destroyed. This was actually originally created with the help and blessing of the inventor of the AK-47 himself, the infamous Mikhail Kalashnikov. If only Kalashnikov had lived long enough to see his invention flying through the air attached to drones. I don't think he'd be rolling in his grave if he knew that was happening. I think he'd be super stoked in his grave. So the way it worked was you take the AK-47 gas system, you turn it upside down to allow for that belt-fed mechanism, then you beefcake it up to handle the more powerful round and give it an additional gas regulator valve. It proved to be a successful, cheaper build and more reliable in trials than its competitors. So by 1969, the slightly improved PKM version was introduced, exported and licensed, produced in various versions all over the commie world. And a PKM machine gun was also widely sold or supplied to rebel and insurgent groups in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. It's even in use by Finland, NATO's second most recent member. I believe there's some in Poland. Correct me if I'm wrong. Do not kill me in the comments. It fills a role similar to the American M60 and then the 240. The PKM is a general purpose machine gun, meaning that it fires that full powered rifle, but it's also light enough to be used either as a tripod mounted medium machine gun or an infantry light carry light machine gun. It can be everywhere and anything. It is the people pleaser of machine guns. Anyone who's ever carried a 240 plus ammo and spare barrels will tell you how much they wish they could shave 10 pounds off that thing. Offering the same suppressive fire capabilities as Western MGs at a lighter weight means that gunners can carry more ammo over longer distances, plus the gun itself is handier and more nimble when forced to run and gun. Now, since then, of course, there have been new weapons like the XM250 that has come out that is very impressive, lightweight, similar weight, with higher firepower, but we're talking about comparing the PK to weapons of its time, let's say. So join me as we doom scroll one last time. Yes, sir, that was cathartic, a bit of full send moment of zen. On Wednesday, February 26th, tomorrow, I'm releasing a Pepperbox special combat footage analysis episode looking at some recent footage of the PKM in war, so we'll be able to take a better look at its performance. Put the link in the description below to get 2 weeks free trial to decide whether you like it or not, and then it's $7.99 a month after that if you do. It helps support the wider journalism pieces that I do and the content that I create here that we produce for free. Thank you guys for watching Spare Parts Army. I'm your average infantryman, Chris Cappy. You can find me at Cappy Army on Instagram and Twitter, and I'll see you guys again soon, hopefully.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and congratulations.
Thank you.
One thing about the budget, Madam Chair, is that we talk about numbers. So you give all the speeches, in the fullness of time, you're relegated to numbers. And in this budget, after all the speeches about the deficit and debt, the deficit goes up the first year in this budget. There's an ongoing joke that Wimpy always told. He said he'd gladly pay a quarter tomorrow for a hamburger today. The deficit goes up the first year of this deficit. Now, that's not a surprise because we have a Republican president. Every Republican president since Nixon has left for his Democratic successors a worse deficit than they inherited, without exception. Every Democrat since Kennedy, every Democratic administration since Kennedy has left for the Republican successors a better deficit situation than they inherited, without exception. So here we are again, Democrat succeeded by a Republican. Republican first opportunity makes the deficit worse. And so you have a budget that includes billions of dollars of tax cuts for the wealthy and pays for it with cuts for working men, women, and those in need, and ends up with a deficit. Now, the only thing I'm asking for in this amendment is if you're going to have a charade like this, don't make the students and the needy pay for it. Don't make Meals on Wheels, students access to college, Pell Grants, student loans, or child nutrition programs pay for this kind of budget. And so we want to exempt the Committee on Education and Workforce from having to come up with cuts to help make this charade of a budget a reality. So that's the amendment.
So that is your amendment.
To exempt the Committee on Education and Workforce from cuts so that children, the elderly, healthcare programs, child nutrition programs don't have to pay for tax cuts for the wealthy.
You've heard the gentleman's amendment. I have no questions to ask. Mr. McGovern?
I would just thank the gentleman for being here, and I agree with him. I support his amendment. Look, Republicans seem to put on equal footing a tax giveaway to Elon Musk with child nutrition, with SNAP, with Pell Grants, with health care programs to help the most needy. And I don't share that view. I think government has a responsibility. One of the major responsibilities is to help lift people up. And again, the ironic thing is you're making these deep cuts, and we're not talking about balancing the budget. We're talking about with a bigger debt and deficit than we've ever had. And so, in any event, I thank the gentleman, and I look forward to supporting his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. McGovern. Ms. Fishbach, you recognize. Ms. Scanlon, you recognize. Ms. Houchin.
I have no questions.
Ms. Leslie Hernandez.
Thank you very much for your amendment. You know, I spent time in my rural district over our work period, and 717 schools in New Mexico receive federal education funding. And if we cut this funding, what we are doing is we are increasing the cost for those schools and the families who live in them. If we do the cuts directed at the various agencies, we are increasing the cost in rural America, and that is the exact opposite of what this president promised. And I think it's very interesting because somebody said earlier that there was a mandate. Well, he won by 1.4%. And what we're seeing now is that there is such an outcry about his economic policies that his approval rating is plummeting and is now in the 30s because of what he is doing on the economy and how he will be hurting the American people. I thank you for the amendment. I think that folks in this chamber who have districts like mine should do well to support it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Leisure Fernandez. Mr. Langworthy, you recognize.
I have no question.
Thank you. Mr. Scott, you recognize. Mr. Griffith. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Scott.
Natalie Dean, and Roy Doggett.
Well, let me thank, first and foremost, Marcy and Joe. Joe, I know you have to go, but I want to thank you for your courage. You talk about profiles and courage. We thank you for standing up and doing the right thing. Couldn't have been said more eloquently than by my colleagues, Steny Hoyer and Rosa DeLauro. But here's what it comes down to. Who do you stand with? In this day and age, and given that embarrassing vote that took place, where does America stand? We stand with the Ukrainian people. We stand with them because we know their cause is right and just, has been articulated by Marcy and Joe, and I know by all the rest of our colleagues here. We have to further demonstrate to the world that there is a co-equal branch of government that has a voice that will supersede that of the current occupant of the office of President of the United States. We stand with Ukraine and the Ukrainian people.
Madeline Dean, Lloyd Doggett, and Tom.
Senator Slotkin.
Thank you. Thank you for being here, Mr. Feinberg. It was good to talk to you in my office. I think there was a lot of things that we can agree on. Acquisition reform. If someone can crack that code, we'd be so much safer and so much better off vis-a-vis China. Getting China out of our supply chains for national security reasons. So I think there's a lot of things where I appreciated your views. My questions, as again I previewed in our conversation, are just about you managing the Pentagon and managing this huge enterprise, and particularly in basically you serving as the chief operating officer of, one of the biggest institutions in the world, and allowing others outside the Pentagon to access sensitive information. I'm a CIA officer, so I'm putting these pieces together and what we've seen, and I just have to say that we know that DOJ is going into departments and agencies collecting data. We know that they are using AI-supported software, access through the Microsoft Cloud, to amalgamate that data. We know that they are feeding sensitive information into that system where they go, and that information can be manipulated, swept up in cyber attacks, leaked. It's personnel information, it's sensitive information about our national security architecture. And we know that DOJ has reportedly brought in their own servers, particularly into OPM, in order to handle this data. Mr. Hegseth has said that he welcomes DOJ into the Pentagon. We know that they have started to look at places like CIA because they just sent an unclassified email with CIA recent hire names in an unclassified space. As a former CIA officer, you just blew the cover of someone who was going to risk their life abroad to protect our country. So my question to you is, what are you going to do when they come to you and they ask for that data? Will you give DOJ access to sensitive, classified, and personnel data of uniformed military bases and locations across the world?
Yeah, as deputy, if I make it there, we have to follow the laws, and we can't allow classified data that is not legal to be in other people's hands to move. So we'll look at the laws closely. We'll make sure that transfer, if it happens, is done by the appropriate ways. Now, of course, the president can decide what is classified and what isn't, and he can declassify. So, of course, always subject to what the president wants to do and his wishes. However, I think it is our job to look at this carefully and make sure it's done properly.
So separate from classified information, although you've stated that the president can just declassify things, will you give access to DOJ to sensitive personnel information about our uniformed military and families, particularly living abroad?
Make sure that all the necessary laws and regulations are met. You know.
I just think, maybe it's because I come from the national security world. Do you know how appetizing it is for our adversaries to have this data? Do you know how appetizing it is for them to understand how to get at a uniformed officer living in a dangerous place? It just is, it's not for me actually a political issue. It is quite literally an issue of safety and security. And as someone who have served abroad, this is, to me, an issue of major vulnerability.
Senator, I will say, to your point, that in my past, I've had compartmentalized programs and access for a long time. So I understand the issue completely. I understand your concerns, and I will look at it closely.
I just think that I don't doubt your interest. But again, these are the conversations that are going to happen in the dead of night when no one here in our committee is watching. You're going to get a call at 7 p.m. that a bunch of 25-year-olds who have never seen classified data in their life, who don't understand what personnel and base data could do in the hands of our adversaries, are going to get a hold of that. And they're going to come to you, and you're going to have to press the button. And all I have to say is we are counting on you, and our national security is counting on you to push back, have a spine, and say no.
Understand the issue.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, Senator Slotkin. Senator Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Think about how full I am with emotion, not just for George Floyd, but the many African Americans that have suffered the same fate as George Floyd. I'm thinking about protests in my country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, the equality expressed in our Declaration of Independence and the Constitution that I've sworn my adult life to support and defend. And thinking about a history of racial issues and my own experiences that didn't always sing of liberty and equality. I'm thinking about how my nomination provides some hope, but also comes with a heavy burden.
Hi again, everybody. It's 5 o'clock in New York. In the wake of George Floyd's murder, the man you just heard from, General Charles Q. Brown Jr., known as General C.Q. Brown, delivered that message about
famous general. Everyone knows him just because
of were in the moment,
how memorable
about
his name
being
is.
An African American man in this country and
you ready
a
to go
member
to
of the United
that?
States military. Just a few months prior, General Brown had been nominated by Donald Trump to be the next chief of staff for the U.S. Air Force. And 3 years after that, very different president of a different party, President Joe Biden, nominated him to the role of chairman of the Joint Chiefs, the United States military's top officer. However, General C.Q. Brown was late Friday night fired by Donald Trump without any reason given and before his 4-year term was up. Illuminating reporting in the New York Times reports that Trump never got over that video we just played you of General Brown. It's something he recorded in the wake of the murder of George Floyd. And in trying to understand this decision, let's listen to what the man who now sits atop the Defense Department, Pete Hegseth, said a few months ago.
The dumbest phrase on planet Earth in the military is our diversity is our strength. You got to fire, you got to fire the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and you got to fire this. I mean, obviously, you're going to bring in a new Secretary of Defense, but any general that was involved, general, admiral, whatever that was involved in any of the DEI woke, it's got to go.
Any general involved in that has got to go. That wasn't it, though. He wrote a book. It was published last year, and he says this of General Brown's promotion to chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, quote, "Was it because of his skin color or his skill? We'll never know, but always doubt," which on its face seems unfair to CQ. But since he has made the race card one of his biggest calling cards, it doesn't really much matter. General Brown's firing was part of a Friday night purge of military brass that Trump and Pete Hegseth deemed unable to carry out Donald Trump's agenda. The first woman to ever lead the Navy, Admiral Lisa Franchetti, and General James Slife, the vice chief of staff at the Air Force, were also fired, along with 3 JAGs, Judge Advocate Generals of the Army, Navy, and Air Force. One of our next guests, Stephen Lepper, who served as deputy legal counsel to the Joint Chiefs of Staff, puts it like this, quote, lying beneath the flowery Pentagon press release and official social media posts praising the officers for their service are sinister, reckless motives that should scare every American. A desire to remove any legal guardrail that might prevent the military from doing the president's bidding without question, and a total lack of understanding of how military leaders are made and what military leaders do. What some are calling a Friday night massacre at the U.S. military is where we start the hour. Pentagon correspondent for the New York Times, Helene Cooper, joins us. She's byline on that New York Times reporting we read from. Also joining us, as we mentioned, retired U.S. Air Force Major General Stephen Lepper, who was a Deputy Judge Advocate General in the Air Force, and retired U.S. Marine Corps Lieutenant Colonel, founder of Democratic Majority Action PAC, Amy McGrath is here. Eddie's still with us. Helene, take us through the reporting.
Hi, Nicole. Thanks for having me. You know, I sat down on Saturday. Friday night was crazy as we got the news. We'd been sort of anticipating this for a while. And I sat down on Saturday and watched that video that you opened the segment with again. And I watched it about 4 or 5 times because I wanted to make sure that there wasn't anything in there where, in which, it's so easy to call him CQ, where General Brown had gone off on a more of a pro-diversity rant. And there wasn't. The video that you played is a very personal story. It runs for 4 minutes and 49 seconds, in which he is talking about his own life as an African-American fighter pilot in the Air Force. He talks about how he going to schools, elementary school with his sister, where they were the only 2
This
black
shit
kids
is wild.
in the whole school, and he felt like they didn't fit in. And then he talks about how when he was at a school with 50% minorities, he still felt like he didn't fit in. He talks about how when he was in the Air Force, he had black friends who came up to him and said, "Why are you hanging out with your squadron members? Most of them, they're all white, instead of hanging out with us." He talks about just, you know, trying to navigate these 2 worlds. And it's not the sort of thing that most people would find offensive, but it did really, really anger both President Trump, because when it landed right after, it was in the middle, it was like on June 4th, I think, it was like a few days after the George Floyd killing. It electrified the Pentagon at the time, the rank and file, and also the officers. And it started in the middle. If you just cast your mind back to that time, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, we're in the middle of this big, huge social justice movement, and Trump was very, very angry about these Black Lives Matter protests that were going on in the streets. He was already angry at his Pentagon, at his chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff at the time, Mark Milley, and even his defense secretary, who had been much more pliable than the one before, Mark Esper, who both stood up to him and said, no, you can't use the Insurrection Act to put active duty military on the streets against these Black Lives Matter protesters. And he felt like he was being stymied. And then CQ Brown, who he had just nominated to be the Air Force chief, comes out with this video, which on the face of it is pretty innocuous, but it really angered Trump, and it really angered the MAGA world. And when Pete Hegseth starts writing in his book, and when he wrote in his book, The War on Warriors, that CQ Brown needed to be fired because he said, the quote was, and you just read that out loud, he said he has made race his biggest calling card. It's that video he's talking about.
Is it true, though? I mean, what is he known for among the military men and women, Helene?
No, it's not true. I mean,
it's never true.
CQ Brown is still the same person who Trump nominated as the Air Force chief of staff in 2020 before he made that video. There's one other thing that that some of the Trump allies and the Hegseth allies point to, and that's a 2022 memo in which the Air Force, C.Q. Brown, the Air Force Secretary at the time, Frank Kendall, and other officials asked that the applicant pool, not the people who were actually hired, but that they asked that the applicant pool, the people who actually applied, be more reflective of America. And they put numerical targets. They wanted African Americans, they wanted Asian Americans, they wanted women, and they didn't meet any of those. They didn't meet those goals, but they wanted to make more of an effort to reach out to more underserved, underrepresented communities at the Pentagon. The Trump people didn't like that as either. But that's it. You noted earlier that when on Friday night, when the notice finally came out that C.Q. Brown was being fired, there's no reason given. It's just, when you talk to the Trump people afterwards, and when we talk to them afterwards, they all say it's because the president wanted his own team, he wanted to bring his own people in. Well, the military is supposed to be like the FBI. It's not supposed to be, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff is supposed to be a position that spans both, two administrations, so that you have that level of continuity, and that you're also able to credibly say that the American military is apolitical. You're not going to become president and then fire all the Democrats in the military. That would be, it's the same, similar to the FBI. But President Trump, I guess, does not really necessarily see it that way.
To direct the day-to-day functioning of the agency responsible for preventing and investigating terror attacks, responding to mass shootings, investigating international drug cartels and gangs, thwarting cyber attacks, and arresting violent criminals and investigating public corruption, among other things. Donald Trump has tapped a podcaster and right-wing media personality who once said this, quote, "My entire life right now is owning the libs." That person is named Dan Bongino. He will be the deputy director of the FBI, the number 2 at the country's top law enforcement agency. It is a job that does not require Senate confirmation. Not that Republicans have had any objection to any of Trump's picks anyway. But if you're not familiar with Bongino, here's a small sampling of the things he's had to say over the years.
Trump is an apex predator. He's the Lion King. Trump went out there tonight and did what Trump does. He's the shark in the ocean, and he acted like it. He lost no one from his base. No one.
Shame on us if we don't enter the legal profession and start to pull people out of the DOJ. I have no problem with Donald Trump investigating Jack Smith either, and you shouldn't either. Jack Smith doesn't have a pardon. What happened yesterday with President Trump and the targeting of him and his attorneys by this piece of human scum, all of these people targeting him in the Justice Department that have forfeited any semblance of allegiance and fidelity to the constitutional republic. I do not need power-drunk pseudo-monarchs, little mini tyrants in my supposedly conservative county, though, sending out ridiculous, childlike amateur hour edicts demanding people wear masks in situations where the risk of transmission is somewhat close to zero. You can take your mask mandate and shove it right up your. The Karate Man, I never thought I'd have to use it in real life. But guess, reminds me of like the House of Bay. Remember Guess Who's Back by House of Bay? Geraldo's back. He wants to fight me again. Why does this guy always want to fight me? Why does everybody always want to fight Dan Bongino? Why? Why does everybody want to fight me all the time? Do I have a punchable face or something?
Yeah.
The conspiracy theories,
I mean that as in
the
he looks like a
outrage,
fighter.
The tightness of the T-shirts. All of it surely floats Donald Trump's boat and his music to his ears. It's likely part of the very essence of the reason he was selected. But the job of deputy director of the FBI, the United States of America, is a serious job that affects every person living here, people around the world. It's the kind of job that has to be done well by whomever does it. If the Bureau stands any chance of actually catching real bad guys. As the Washington Post reports, quote, the deputy director answers to the director, serving as the agency's second in command, responsible for day-to-day law enforcement operations and all of the FBI's domestic and international investigative and intelligence activities. The FBI has 55 field offices, 60 offices abroad, 38,000 staffers, and a budget of $10 billion. Managing the day-to-day affairs of the FBI is a serious responsibility, and traditionally that post of deputy director of the FBI has gone to a career FBI agent. In fact, the FBI Agents Association says that in a meeting in January, before Kash Patel was confirmed, they told Patel this, quote, the FBI deputy director should continue to be an onboard active special agent. This has been the case for 117 years for many compelling reasons, including operational expertise and experience, as well as the trust of our special agent population. According to the FBI Agents Association, at the time, Kash Patel agreed and said that the job should go to a career FBI agent. Now, Patel either changed his mind or was overruled, but he's given an already wary workforce another reason to be suspicious and distrustful of him. And the FBI now has at its helm what the New York Times describes this way, quote, the least experienced leadership pair in the Bureau's history. Donald Trump's choice of a pro-Trump podcaster to be the number 2 at the FBI is where we start today. NBC News justice reporter, author of Sedition Hunters, How January 6 Broke the Justice System, Ryan Riley's back, plus former lead investigator for the January 6 Select Committee, author of Harbingers, What January 6 and Charlottesville Reveal About Rising Threats to American Democracy. Tim Hafey's back. Also joining us, former top official at the Department of Justice, MSNBC legal analyst Andrew Weissman's here. Ryan Riley, you have some great reporting on how this is being received inside the FBI. Tell us about it.
Yeah, I think a lot of eye rolls sort of within the FBI. But remember, there is a contingent within the FBI who is very supportive of Donald Trump and some of the moves that he is making. But when, Dan Bongino was announced, what my brain immediately went to was actually an interaction that he had with a former FBI special agent who's also now a podcaster, Kyle Seraphin. He's someone who is in very close communication with Kash Patel. Kash Patel's foundation, before Kash Patel was FBI director, actually paid Kyle Seraphin's family, along with a couple of other right-wing FBI special agents. And there was this falling out because there's this disagreement about how this Mar-a-Lago raid was being discussed, because Dan Bongino accepted this sort of premise that there was something untoward about the Mar-a-Lago search, that the FBI had messed up there. And Kyle Seraphin looked at those documents and said that, no, this is actually really standard operating procedure. So there was this enormous falling out, even though basically Dan Bongino was the reason that Kyle Seraphin got onto the radar of Kash Patel and received that money. That's where he did his first interview, for example, when Kyle Seraphin was still this FBI whistleblower. There was this falling out over just basic facts because, Kyle, for everything about him, he's someone who is very much so about, establishing the facts. And the facts is that this was standard operating procedure, how that search was conducted. The FBI did not have a plot to assassinate Donald Trump when they searched Mar-a-Lago, when Donald Trump was all the way in New Jersey. So, you very quickly see this sort of breaking out into a different realm where, you have a deputy director of the FBI now who just doesn't seem very dedicated to the facts based on what you've just presented there and based upon a lot of the rhetoric that we've seen previously. Of course, I should say Dan Bongino is, in his first appearance, I guess, today, or last show today, was saying that he's now taking on a different role. But within the Bureau, there's just, this comes on top of just so much in the past month plus that has really just rocked the Bureau to its core. This isn't going to help that entire situation, Nicole.
Andrew Weissman, NBC is reporting this, quote, this is really concerning. Any hope that Kash could be steered by having experienced leaders around him is out the window. We now have 2 conspiracy theorists and election deniers running our premier law enforcement and intelligence agency. That is beyond problematic. I think that some of what is public facing, right, is investigating crimes that go on to be prosecuted. But some of what I think is opaque to the vast majority of Americans is that the FBI is a massive intelligence and national security agency. And national security cases are not cases that are always tried in a courtroom. Sometimes no one ever knows the details. But Kash Patel and Dan Bongino will also be in charge of that. How will that work?
You tell she doesn't know who he is.
Well, I think the idea that you have
Dan
two
Bongino.
people with a grand total of zero experience working at the FBI it's not just problematic. That is, it makes you question whether the goal here is to not have an effective FBI at all, to basically be hollowing it out. When you think about what those leaders have to do, one is they have to inspire people. They have to give confidence. These are public servants who give up a lot, and you have to sort of make sure that they feel supported and that they are rewarded for doing a good job. But you also need people who can spot key issues, who can guide them appropriately. And if they don't have experience at the Bureau, neither one of them, I pray that they learn on the job quickly, but that is not what you want in this group, and particularly in the national security area. I remember Director Mueller, who I was the general counsel for, and it was a privilege to serve with him. I mean, you could feel every day that he and the deputy director, what weighed on them was the idea that there would be some terrorist incident here or abroad where people would be hurt. That is such, it's important to have that work ethic, but it's important to have that depth of experience to know where to look and what is noise and what is real. And that, to me, was the thing that I found remarkable in watching those two men, as well as Andrew McCabe and a host of other people. And the idea that you would pick people who don't have that skill set and hope that they get that skill set on the job is beyond, it's just beyond imaginable in terms of just from an apolitical perspective, what you want in terms of making this country safe.
This video is brought to you by Ground News. The history of Japan-China relations is a turbulent story, with periods of relative friendliness being replaced by periods of hostility, in a repeating cycle that's gone on for decades. The past few years have seen that relationship deteriorate, as China more aggressively asserts its disputed territorial claims, Japan hikes its defence spending, and issues from visas to seafood inflame tensions. However, in just the past few months, there's been a noticeable effort to rebuild the relationship. So, in this video, we're going to explain why Japan-China relations have been struggling, why Japan is seeking to warm the relationship up again, and why it won't be easy to maintain.
It won't be easy. Who's the worst politician right now? Hear our thoughts and argue with us on our podcast, The World Leader Leaderboard. Find it over on the TLDR Podcast YouTube channel or in your favourite podcast app. The recent downturn in Japan-China relations has several reasons. One of these was Russia's invasion of Ukraine and China's ongoing support for Vladimir Putin's regime. In 2022, alluding to potential future Chinese military action, Japan's then Prime Minister Fumio Kishida warned that Ukraine today might be the East Asia of tomorrow, and his government kickstarted a major military build-up, strengthened Japan's partnership with the United States and other US allies in the region like South Korea and the Philippines, with a view of countering China. Another longer-running source of tension between the two countries is the dispute over the Senkaku Islands, located in the East China Sea, controlled and administered by Japan, but claimed by China, which refers to them as the Diaoyu Islands. If you're interested, we made a video on the dispute years ago, but the TLDR is that the uninhabited islands are in a strategically significant location,
near Japan, China and Taiwan, close to important shipping lanes and oil and gas reserves. China has frequently asserted its claim by dispatching Coast Guard ships and other vessels to the waters around the islands. In fact, 2024 was the third consecutive year that a record was set for the number of days that Chinese government vessels were spotted in the Senkaku Islands contiguous zone. China has also at times placed so-called hydrometeorological buoys within Japan's exclusive economic zone near the islands, prompting condemnation from Japan. The difficult relations have not just been based on territorial or military issues though. In 2023, China imposed a blanket ban, which it eventually lifted on the import of Japanese seafood, after Japan, with approval from the International Atomic Energy Agency, began releasing treated water from the Fukushima nuclear power plant into the Pacific Ocean. The two countries have also been at odds over visa reciprocity, and in 2024, Japan's foreign minister demanded China crack down on, quote, groundless, malicious and anti-Japanese sentiment, particularly on social media, after the fatal stabbing of a Japanese child in China. Now, it's worth pointing out that before more recent events, there have been nominal efforts to warm relations, with both sides agreeing on their desire for a mutually beneficial relationship based on common strategic interests, and building constructive and stable Japan-China relations. Some progress was indeed made under Kishida. Towards the end of his time as Prime Minister, China began to ease its ban on Japanese seafood, for example. However, in recent months, two things have provided fresh impetus for Japan and China to improve their ties. The first was Kishida's resignation and subsequent replacement as Japanese Prime Minister by Shigeru Ishiba, and the second was the return of Donald Trump to the US presidency. Now, we'll get on to why these things portended an effort to improve Japan-China ties in a moment, but first we'll take a look at the things that have happened in recent months to actually improve the relationship. In November, a month and a half after becoming Japanese Prime Minister, Shigeru Ishiba had a face-to-face meeting with China's President Xi Jinping during a summit in Peru, where the two leaders affirmed that they would promote the two countries' mutually beneficial relationship. Japan's Foreign Minister Takeshi Iwaya subsequently visited China and announced that Japan would implement visa loosening measures for Chinese nationals, in reciprocation of a move by China to resume visa waivers for Japanese nationals. The two countries also restarted the Japan-China ruling party Exchange Council for the first time in 6 years, with a delegation from Japan's ruling Liberal Democratic Party visiting China in mid-January. There's talk of China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi visiting Japan this month, as well as a possible visit to China by Prime Minister Ishiba in May. It was also announced this month that one of China's contentious buoys had been removed from Japanese waters, although others remain in place. So let's look at why Japan is mending its relations with China. As previously mentioned, a lot of this is a result of Shigeru Ishiba becoming Japanese Prime Minister. If you know anything about Ishiba's political background, it might not come as a surprise. After all, it was Ishiba's political mentor who normalised relations within the People's Republic of China in the 1970s. Of all the candidates for the LDP leadership to replace Kishida last year, it was Ishiba who was effectively the most moderate on China. He's spoken about the need to improve ties with China, to cooperate in necessary areas, pursue realist diplomacy, and ensure China's stable development benefits the entire region. Some observers have noted that Ishiba is more overtly pursuing the so-called double hedge strategy in Japan's foreign policy. That is, maintaining the strategically important partnership with the United States, which forms a key part of Japan's and the region's security, while also keeping relations warm with China, Japan's largest trade partner and one of the largest investment destinations for Japanese companies. The return of Donald Trump, as we mentioned earlier, is also likely a driver of China seeking warmer ties with Japan, because China's ongoing economic slowdown and the spectre of new Trump tariffs boosts the importance of China's economic relationship with Japan. But also because driving any kind of wedge between the US and its ally Japan can only be a good thing for Beijing, especially as the past few years under Biden saw the hardening of the US-Japan-South Korea anti-China alliance. Concurrently, Trump's return may also provide greater justification for Japan to seek warmer ties with China as a counterbalance. It's true that Ishiba's first meeting with Trump earlier this month went unexpectedly well, with Ishiba offering to buy more American natural gas and pledging to boost Japan's investment in the US to $1 trillion, while Trump reaffirmed the US commitment to defend Japan and promote a free and open Indo-Pacific. However, that doesn't mean that Japan won't get caught up in Trump's brewing trade war. While it's avoided targeted tariffs so far, Japan's been hit by Trump's expanded and increased tariffs on all steel and aluminium imports. To wrap things up though, it's important to note that while things related to China and Trump are going pretty smoothly so far from Ishiba's perspective, this will not be easy to maintain. Some of the underlying causes of tension, the Senkaku Islands for example, remain unresolved, meaning there's always an opportunity for things to deteriorate. Domestically, Ishiba is not in the strongest position either, at the head of a minority government and with the more hawkish members of his own party uncomfortable or unhappy with his swift rapprochement with China. So this story is definitely one to keep an eye on, but consuming news can be pretty difficult in the current media landscape. We're increasingly being flooded by misleading content, algorithmic feeds that just back up our biases, and reductions in fact-checking efforts. It almost feels like people are intentionally making it harder to get to the truth. One way you can cut through the noise is with Ground News, a website and app on a mission to give readers an easy, data-driven, objective way to read the news. Every day, Ground News ingests over 50,000 articles from all over the world. Every story comes with a quick visual breakdown of the political bias, factuality, and ownership of the source's reporting, all backed by ratings from 3 independent news monitoring organisations. For example, here's a story about Trump's blanket tariffs on steel and aluminium imports. Right away, you can see that the story had at least 403 outlets reporting on it. 33% lean left, while 17% lean right. Every story also comes with a detailed view of the bias distribution, factuality scores, and even specific ownership information, so you can see how reliable the reporting actually is. You can also swipe through some of the headlines and see that left-leaning outlets tend to frame the tariffs as being a negotiating tool, while right-leaning outlets portray them as being aimed at protectionism and economic revival. But my favourite part has to be their blind spot feed, which highlights stories that are being underreported on one side of the political spectrum or the other. This not only helps you redress your personal news bias by reading stories you might otherwise have missed, but also gives you a better perspective on how the media ecosystem is being manipulated and shifted to fit political objectives. Ground News is such a useful tool for our current media landscape, cutting through opinion and noise with a feed free from manipulation or algorithms, and I can't recommend it enough. In fact, if you subscribe today, you'll get 40% off their Vantage plan. That's under $5 a month for unlimited access to every incredible Ground News feature. This offer is only available here, so make sure you go to ground.news/TLDR or click the link in the description to get started and support an independent news platform working to make the media landscape more transparent.
A South African appears to be the full-time nanny of the sitting president of the United States, and they both seem to be promoting pro-Russian propaganda, aka lies. The American public is barnstorming and flooding the zone because Congress is out of session right now. They're all having town halls, and we witnessed on the internet something very alarming. And I'm so grateful that we live in the era of modern cell phones, because we all need to record and be vigilant about things like this. Look at this video of what happened in Idaho at a town hall.
In the meantime, we've just got to be a little aggressive with some of these folks here. Look at her. No, I'm trying to move. I should go out and try. You're not helping. You're not helping. You are not helping.
Excuse me, Sheriff Norris. This gentleman is assaulting me. This man is assaulting me. This man is assaulting me. Is this your deputy? Is this your deputy? No. No. Is he your deputy? Is he a deputy? No. He's our deputy. Who the fuck? Hey.
These were not paid.
You're hurting her. You're hurting her. Get the fuck away from her. You're hurting her. You are not.
Okay, I think that they try out things in red states. We live in a red state. They're trying out the Christian nationalism. We're buying Trump Bibles, putting them in public schools, putting the 10 Commandments. Here we're trying out Gestapo-style tactics in a fully red state, Idaho. And this woman was sitting there. She had every right to sit there. And two men who did not have on any sort of badge or uniform
I like how she said two men, because the third man did have a badge.
What?
But he was off duty.
What the hell is going on?
Well, I'll tell you what's going on. That is what happens in fascism when you speak out. When you speak out against what the fascists believe, that is what happens to you. You get carried out by two men who are not law enforcement. It's a simple assault from the very jump. And what concerns me the most is she said, "Sheriff, are these your deputies?" So there's a law enforcement officer there who is unwilling to protect a private citizen against another private citizen.
Because he knew he'd be breaking the law.
Yeah,
that's
and,
why
you know,
those two
we
guys
see
got
now
in
that
fucking civil suits.
this president, convicted felon, you elect a criminal to be in charge of the United States of America, and there's going to be the most compromised, corrupt administration ever. So I have a message to all of the upper middle to upper class white people that triple Trump voted because they wanted lower taxes. You just took our country, put it in the toilet, took a huge steaming dump on it, and flushed it down the toilet because you're okay with racism. That's not a deal breaker for you. You're okay with Sig Heils. That's not a deal breaker for you. You're okay with a man convicted of 34 felonies. That's not a deal breaker for you. When you go to your mega church and pray to Jesus and you talk about family values and conservative values, remember that guy you voted for fucked a porn star while his wife was at home breastfeeding their kid. So you have no credibility. You're either a racist, a Nazi, or an apologist for both, which in the same, the apologist is almost worse.
I completely agree. The hypocrisy of the evangelicals has been exposed by Trump because he is the most immoral, unethical, and they support him at like 97%. The issue that is just so unbelievable is you see all of these criminals get out of jail. But because they were for the president of the United States and advanced his agenda, it was okay to be a criminal. This type of behavior, because it supports what Donald Trump wants, they're emboldened. More people are emboldened to commit crimes in service of the MAGA message because of Donald Trump. And this will not be an isolated incident over the next 4 years.
No way. Okay, so Emmanuel Macron heads over to D.C. to sit down with Trump. Because we have a major problem. Trump has, I just want everyone to remember this, the Wall Street Journal, owned by Rupert Murdoch, did an article about a week before the presidential race and said, whoever wins, they're being handed a very rock solid economy. And we had allies at this time. With just a little over 30 days, this man has wrecked the economy, dismantled the American government, and wrecked all of our allies, post-World War II allies, just flushed it all down the toilet because he's compromised by Vladimir Putin. So Macron goes over to sit down and talk to him. And Trump starts his pro-Putin propaganda bullshit in the Oval Office, and Macron fact-checks him in real time. Play the clip.
Again, just so you understand, Europe is loaning the money to Ukraine. They get their money back.
No, in fact, to be frank, we paid 60% of the total effort, and it was through, like the US, loans, guarantee, grants, and we provided real money. To be clear, we have 230 billion.
Wow,
so
Trump
he gets
really
fact-checked in real time. And then, of course, Trump, then he starts talking about all the crazy shit he likes to talk about. So he starts talking about the gold at Fort Knox, because I'm sure that Musk and Putin have said, here's your approved list of talking points. Right. You can belittle gay people. You can belittle trans people. We'll give you the Kennedy Center. You can pick fights with the governor of Maine. I mean, he probably has an approved talking point. Fort Knox happens to be one of these things. Watch Macron, and for the listeners, listen to Macron as Trump is talking about this. And Trump is dead serious, and I want you to look at Macron's face, and for the listener, listen to this.
Going to Fort Knox to see if the gold is there, because maybe somebody stole the gold. Tons of gold.
I mean, he's sitting there busting out laughing. He's like sitting there and he's like, this guy is the president of the United States. And he's sitting there talking about going to do some, pirate ninja move to discover all this gold. It's so embarrassing, but it makes sense to me that like Putin and Musk are like, okay, here's some little side projects we can get him focused on, because you can just throw squirrels in front of him. I mean, he's going to go chase them. All right. Next up, this is where it gets pretty dangerous. We have Musk that sent the emails to HHS, and HHS sent a response to its employees. And Aaron Parnas post, all HHS employees just received this email informing them they no longer have to comply with Elon Musk's 5-bullet point email. But if they do, they should, quote, assume that what they write will be read by malign foreign actors.
That says it all. There is absolutely no doubt in my mind that the reason Elon Musk wanted to get everybody's information and wants to compromise people in the federal government is because that then makes it easier to turn the government and private individuals' information over to a nefarious government, aka Russia. There's just not a doubt in my mind.
I think that the warp speed that Elon Musk and Big Balls have moved in to get all of this information, they've transferred it over to other hard drives. All of this is illegal. And I think there's an interesting point here, and we need to read up on it further. There was a court filing that said that Elon Musk was not the head of Doge. And there's been some questioning where judges have said, well, who is the head of Doge? Nobody answers, which tells me that everybody that's doing this knows that it is illegal. So they're trying to not put a point person's name at the top of this because they're doing illegal shit.
They'll be subject to the oversight committee.
And I think my personal opinion is it is so bad that all of this information is being sent to Russia, as evidenced here by this HHS memo.
I completely agree. And what is really interesting is I've read 2 articles about this. I cannot speak to the veracity, but Big Balls apparently went through KGB school. I don't know if that's true. Was it not Big Balls?
Big Balls, he personally didn't go through KGB school. His grandfather was a KGB spy.
Okay, so we're 2 generations removed from the KGB. We've got Russia pulling the strings. Elon Musk.
Does she know when the KGB was around?
We're supposed to sit around and say,
and how old Big Balls is?
I think Elon Musk is completely independent. He has no alliance to Russia.
I mean, I just don't think there's any question that this is a much bigger thing. And they have all of the triple Trumpers all fixated during the election on trans issues and immigration. Have you noticed the last 12, 14 days, crickets on immigration? Total crickets. You don't even see it hardly ever as a thing. Number one, Biden was deporting people at a much faster click than Trump is. And number two, it just shows you once they get into office, they don't talk about that anymore. Fox doesn't cover it anymore. There's not all these caravans of trans immigrants coming to indoctrinate your kids. All of that just falls out of the news cycle because they scapegoat these people.
Right.
They scapegoat them. And now we know the scapegoating was to get these people primed and ready for this Russian propaganda and Russian misinformation. All right. To expose even more just absolute criminality, the U.S. attorney in D.C. posts the following on social media. And he says, as President Trump's lawyers, we are proud to fight and protect his leadership as our president, and we are vigilant in standing against entities like the Associated Press that refuse to put America first. Number one of the first things about fascism, fascism is, overt nationalism.
Right.
The free press is an enemy of this. So that is insane. But if you please put the tweet back up, I want to read what Mike Drucker wrote. He said, outside of everything else overtly wrong and stupid about this, they couldn't even get the fucking apostrophe right in Trump's. some real merit-based hiring there. So for the listener, they put TRUMPS apostrophe instead of TRUMP apostrophe S. This guy, this is so wrong. This is illegal. He is not the president's personal attorney. But if you go back to Trump 1.0 and all of the people that left him or that Trump fired, Trump wanted the following. He wanted the Justice Department and the Attorney General to be his personal attorneys. We all know that he said he wanted generals the same as Hitler. He wanted the same kind of generals that Hitler had. This is a complete coup. And we have agency over the news that we read, and we have to flood the zone with these congressmen that are going home and congresswomen that are going home and barnstorm these town halls, have our phones out, be vigilant, be ready, because what is happening, I think, is behind the scenes. It's even worse than what we're seeing.
It's absolutely worse behind the scenes. And there is no question the U.S. Attorney, the Attorney General's office, the Department of Justice, they work for the American people. They don't work for a president. And this guy and everybody in the Trump administration has abdicated the United States in favor of being a loyalist to Trump. And that is dangerous, and that is fascism.
All right. Make sure you subscribe to our channel, and we'll see you all later.
I've had it.
MAGA politicians are leaving their right-wing cult and heading into their home districts, and they are getting absolutely annihilated by their Republican constituents. It's delicious. Watch this first video. It's Representative Rich McCormick. Watch this faceplant.
Then a cult. Not as a party.
Elon was going to be the main topic tonight, and he's going to continue to be the main topic tonight because we are all freaking pissed off about this. You're going to hear it and feel it.
Tyranny is rising in the White House, and a man has declared himself our king. So I would like to know, rather, the people would like to know what you, congressmen, and your fellow congressmen are going to do to rein in the megalomaniac in the White House.
When you talk about tyranny, when you talk about presidential power, I remember having the same discussion with Republicans when Biden was elected. The funny thing is, you're sitting here and a lot of you would probably say those January 6s who are yelling just as loud as you, who are upset just like you. We're supposed to have great balance and power. We are. You can disagree with me all you want, but I'm just telling you the way it is. And I get that you don't agree with me and you think I'm not telling the truth, unless they're lying to me, and you can say they are. So who? Okay.
What is the expected outcome of Canadian tariffs?
Most of the tariffs were immediately lifted because they conceded.
It is a voter suppression law that you signed on as a sponsor of, and I want to know why you're scared for me to vote.
Ooh. I'm definitely not scared of you, vote.
Okay, I think it's just a thing of beauty that they're trying to do all this stuff and they're either getting laughed at.
Right.
I mean, it is. It's ridiculous. The second he gets out of his right-wing media echo chamber and away from the MAGA cultists, he faces what MAGA calls, quote, real Americans. Americans are not as stupid as MAGA thinks they are. Now, a lot of Americans are, listener, okay? You know I'm on the permanent record of saying that. But the people that are engaged, that are going to show up to these town halls, know that we're not a monarchy. Know that Elon Musk should be nowhere near any lever of power. It's insane. And the way that Elon Musk emasculates Trump on a daily basis should be alarming for everybody. And these people are not going to stand for it.
What I think is interesting is his answers. They were pathetic. I mean, he gave them absolutely nothing to make them want to vote for him or to make them think that he represents them as constituents versus Donald Trump as the monarch or Elon Musk as the real president. I mean, this guy needs a lesson in politics 101, at least on how to bullshit these people better, because it was pathetic.
Well, I think you're hitting on something here. Like, this is the world they're all living in this airtight MAGA crazy ass bubble. And the minute you get outside of it, it can't breathe. It can't live, because it's founded on this whole principle that everybody's going to worship Donald Trump, which is insane. It's absolutely insane. And this is in Georgia. You could tell by that one woman's accent. Okay, now let's move along to Representative Scott Fitzgerald getting absolutely annihilated at his town hall. Viewer, get your popcorn.
Getting rid of the DEI.
End result of the fraud and abuse that has been discovered already.
In Wisconsin, constituents showered 2 Republican congressmen with boos in 2 contentious town halls. Elon Musk's role in the Trump White House was a concern.
Are you going to subpoena him at some point? After you're done with the budget or whatever, are you willing to use your subpoena power to say, Musk, come in here, stand in front of Congress and answer some hard questions?
Certainly the discussion in and around Doge and with the probationary moves that have already been done.
Is that a fart noise?
They're going to have to be scrutinized at some point.
I would like to know what you feel in this issue of an unelected person having so much power.
I don't think Elon Musk, he doesn't have the power to do anything.
Why is he doing stuff?
Ukraine, also a topic of discussion, with Congressman Scott Fitzgerald disagreeing with President Trump's false claim that Ukraine started the war.
No, Ukraine didn't start the war.
Have you expressed your opinion to Trump?
To Donald Trump? No.
Congressman Fitzgerald then pivoted to defending Trump.
And I don't think that the president's goals are not what everybody wants, which is to end the war.
According to CNN affiliate WTMJ, no Trump supporters spoke up at Congressman Fitzgerald's town hall.
Epic.
Wow. Yeah. So I want you to look at the optics of all of those people. You know, MAGA always wants to point out the color of people's skin, their gender, their sexual orientation. To me, that looked like just a bunch of white people, working class, Gen X to boomers, irate at how ridiculous these abuses of power is and what they're doing to dismantle American democracy. That guy face planted, as did the one before him. These are Republican districts, and people are pissed.
These Congress people are going to have to decide, are they going to represent their constituents and be reelected, or are they going to support Trump and risk their constituents not voting for them? Because I think this makes it pretty clear, and you see it all over YouTube and the internet at large. MAGA people who are 3-time Trumpers, they're furious. They're furious about the way their jobs are being cut, the way all of these things are being handled, inflation not going down. So these people at some point are going to have to make a choice. Are you loyal to your constituents? Or are you loyal to Donald Trump? And just one quick thing. You know, I forget about that disastrous press conference with Elon Musk and his kid, and you see it there, and you see how people in middle America react to it, and you realize we're all feeling the same way. Why is this man in charge and the president is sitting slumped over the Resolute desk?
It was so emasculating. And Trump is the type of guy that if Obama had some billionaire next to him, or Biden, and brought a kid into the room, and the kid was picking their nose and wiping their boogers on the desk, Trump would go on about it for months and months and months. He would not be able to stop talking because he likes to traffic in that type of stuff. Well, you know what he did after that? I've talked about this before. He had the Resolute desk picked up, and it's being refinished right now. And so I just think that's interesting because we all know he's a germaphobe. But the reason you see middle Americans so pissed off is because we have a president in the United States that is saying things like this. And we always speed up his voice to chipmunk speed. But it's important that we all listen because this man is president and what he says needs to be heard and needs to be judged and people need to get angry about it. Listen to this blatant attack on the First Amendment.
Watch this MSNBC, which is a threat to democracy, actually. They're stone cold mean, but they're stuttering. They're all screwed up. They're all mentally screwed up. They don't know what. Their ratings have gone down the tubes. I don't even talk about CNN. CNN's sort of like, I don't know, they're pathetic, actually. But MSNBC was mean. Their ratings are absolutely down. This Rachel Maddow, what does she have? She's got nothing. Nothing.
Yeah, I mean,
she took a sabbatical.
Pretty shitty.
Where she worked one day a week. They paid her a lot of money. She gets no ratings. I should go against her in the ratings because I'll tell you, she gets no ratings. All she does is to talk about Trump,
Is that
Trump,
when
Trump,
she wrote
Trump,
her
Trump.
book?
All
That was
different
actually
subjects.
kind of
Trump,
good.
Trump,
It wasn't.
Trump,
It
Trump.
wasn't anything about Maddow. I forgot what it was
Number
about
one.
though.
Yes, she talks about Trump, 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 because you are the dictator. Right. Who ran and said, oh, I'll just be a dictator for one day. Well, obviously, you've given yourself some grace there and extended that all the way to here. You said that you wanted nothing to do with Project 2025. I think there are reports that Project 2025 in your first 30 days around 65 to 70% complete. What does Rachel Maddow do? She speaks truth to power. What does Rachel Maddow have? She's a Rhodes Scholar. She's highly educated. You want to browbeat. Trump wants to browbeat anybody that calls him out, and Rachel has consistently called him out, and he can't stand it. And all he cares about are ratings. And speaking of ratings, Donald Trump, yours are so underwater, and each and every week we'll keep reporting on his approval rating because this matters to him. He cares, and I know that a part of me thinks, oh, once he gets in, he won't care about his ratings anymore because the fix is in. You can't teach an old dog new tricks. The fix is in. There's no question with all of these appointees, and there's no question that Congress, Republican Senate is in on the fix or terrified of the consequences, not from their constituents, but from the Trump administration. But he cares desperately about being popular. He cares so much about metrics and ratings, and that's not going to change simply because Project 2025 is 70% complete. This man is vapid. This man is shallow. This man is a malignant narcissist, and he cares so much about this shit. He even had magazine covers photoshopped that said that he was the Time Man of the Year when the years that he wasn't, and had them framed and put up in his golf clubs. He will lie about metrics. That's how much he cares about them.
Absolutely. Well, he lies about everything. But what's interesting is, like in Russia, the media is all rah Putin because it's propaganda, because that's fascism. You tell people lies so that they can't think for themselves. He wants MSNBC gone because he wants Fox News, his own propaganda network, to tell people only what he wants to tell them. I mean, it's fascism, plain and simple. This guy is a fascist. Mark Milley said it. We all know it. We've seen his actions. But it is interesting to me that he says, I'd like to go up against Rachel Maddow. You know what? I'd like that too. I would like you to debate Rachel Maddow. Go on that show. She would eat him for breakfast because, as we've said before, he's not intellectually gifted. She is. He is not an orator. She is. And there's a question about his mental capacity to begin with before you even get into how insecure he is and how you can get him off on a rabbit trail anytime you want. But yeah, he is. If we have learned nothing in the past month, we have learned that he is true to one thing: his narcissism and insecurity, and the overarching is fascism.
And this attack in that clip, this attack on the First Amendment, this is the most dangerous stuff. This is the most dangerous form of fascism. He doesn't want any criticism of his form of nationalism. And what fascism is overhyped nationalism. What democracy is Rachel Maddow speaking truth to power. Independent media like us speaking truth to power. He doesn't want it because he's such a narcissist that it's all a veneer, and any sort of scratch into what he thinks about himself reveals how insecure he is under that, and he can't handle it. So these attacks that he is doing, he kicked out the Associated Press, which they are suing. doing. These are attacks on the First Amendment. This is all a part of the plan. He wants around the clock fluffery and puffery about how great he is 24/7, 365. And I have news for everybody. There is not enough time in the whole conception of the universe, nor enough compliments in everybody's voices that could ever fix this man. This is an incredibly broken man, and I'll leave it to the psychiatrist to completely analyze, but this is not somebody worthy of dismantling all of democracy for. This is utterly insane. I want to remind everybody, he's not a spring chicken. Make sure you subscribe to our channel, and we'll see you guys later today.
I've had it.
Trump's extraordinary deportation plans are already making history, but his allies want more, pitching a proposal that would boot 12 million migrants before the midterms. The initiative would require the government to eject nearly 500,000 illegal aliens per month. To keep pace with the Trump deportations, it would require a 600% increase in activity. Eric Prince, the man behind Blackwater, has offered the White House his services.
No, do not.
These migrants
You're fucking me. You're fucking me. They're gonna do it. They're gonna fucking get Eric Prince involved with this shit. Oh my fucking god, bro.
We can't let them deport the millions of families across this country who have been doing the work that keeps our economy going every day. If you look at the food that's on your table, think about who picked it. If you look at your homes, think about who built them.
First, Democrats say illegals aren't taking American jobs. Now they're claiming not a single job will get done without them. While Democrats cry about crops, cartels are coming up with ingenious schemes to smuggle drugs. Like this Colombian who was caught muling 10 grand of coke under his wig.
Oh my
the old
god.
cocaine wig.
You mean, oh wow, you mean it failed. Crazy. What an innovative way that they came up with that failed.
Sabotaging ICE raids.
We are training the members of the coalition to do these patrols. We've been doing the patrols for years in Los Angeles and San Diego, but yesterday we had more than 150 people combing through the streets of Los Angeles looking for any ICE activity. And early in the morning, we found 2 operations. We're in every neighborhood of Los Angeles. This morning already, we have combed through dozens of communities of Los Angeles looking for ICE activity.
They claim they're not breaking the law.
If they want to talk about legalities, the first person that should be detained and arrested is the president. He's the biggest criminal there is.
Other groups are doxing ICE agents, hanging up posters with their photos, names, phone numbers, basically letting the cartels know exactly who to hit. DHS
Oh my god, yeah. The cartels are going to target
has
ICE.
a major announcement. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem joins me now. All right, Secretary, what do you guys have in store?
Well, we are putting in place and enforcing the Alien Registration Act, which is using every single tool that we have at our disposal to do exactly what President Trump promised the American people. The Alien Registration Act says that within 30 days of being in this country illegally, someone must register with the federal government. They will be fingerprinted. They must announce that they are here. And if they do so, they can avoid criminal charges and fines, and we will help them relocate right back to their home country. And what this does is provide them an opportunity to come back someday and to be a part of the American dream. If they don't register,
I love how everything is an ultimatum with these people about how if you let us break the law now, then you'll be open to come back or keep your job and whatever.
All right, so this act, I mean, this is from 1940. This is Roosevelt. This is signed into law by a Democrat president and has been on the books. I mean, that's what they're supposed to be doing now, we're saying. They're supposed to have registered with the federal government. Where are they supposed to be registering?
Well, we have a website that is live now. It's at USCIS/alien registration. You can go there now. And these folks that are here in this country illegally can self-register. They can avoid the criminal charges. They can avoid the fines, and we will help them go home. And what that provides for them is a safer environment. It's safer for our communities. It saves us taxpayer dollars, and it allows them an opportunity to come back to this country and to be an American and to live the American dream, which is truly what our history is all about. So yes, Jesse, this is not a new law. I'm just announcing that I'm going to enforce our law. And we're going to use this tool to make sure that we're following our law to provide people an opportunity to go home and come back and be a part of our country's future in the right way.
It has to be against the law to dox an ICE agent, to tell the cartels and the gangbangers, this is where this guy lives, this is what his wife looks like, because that's the information you're giving out. How are these people still walking around? This must be able to get prosecuted.
So where we have the opportunity and it's against the law, we absolutely will be prosecuting these individuals. And that is what I think people need to recognize, is what they're doing is putting these law enforcement officers' lives in jeopardy. That they are exposing them to dangerous criminals, to the cartels, to gangs that want and will take their lives in order to perpetuate their drug trafficking, their human trafficking, and their illegal activities. So this doxing in many times is not just risky, but it's dangerous, it's criminal, and we will go after them, and there will be consequences.
All right, before we let you go, repeat the name of the website for the illegals to register, because I don't think I got it.
You were testing me. It is USCIS/alien registration, but they need to go there now today, because within 30 days of being in this country illegally, they should register. They will be able to be fingerprinted, we'll know that they're here, and we'll help them go home. So it's fantastic, and it's a tool that will help them become an American the right way.
All right, sounds humane to me. Secretary, thank you so much for joining Prime Time.
Thank you, Jesse. Have a great night.
You too.
Some alarming news, further confirmation that Donald Trump is a Russia/Putin sympathizer. Yesterday in the United Nations, there was a vote regarding Russia and their actions. Let me show it to you. The U.S. votes against the UN resolution condemning Russia for the Ukraine war. Now, I ask you, when all of the Western allies, all of NATO is voting in favor of this, and the United States votes with Hungary, Belarus,
don't forget Israel,
China, all the dictators.
No, even China didn't vote for this.
Even China didn't?
No, even China set this out, Pumps. They voted with Iran, North Korea.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, this tells you everything you need to know. And this whole Trump-Russia thing, from the Mueller report to before that, when Kevin McCarthy was talking to then Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, and they said, we think Trump is on Putin's payroll. And then this total bend over on the international global stage and lying, using Tucker Carlton's and the Kremlin's talking points to the Americans and completely lying that Ukraine started the war. And it's no surprise. So we have a compromised federal government right now, a compromised executive branch, and we're going to keep calling it out. But this is insanity. And to all the triple Trumpers, you might think you want to live the way the Russians live, and you might think North Korea seems fun, and you might think Iran seems cute. You're a dumbass. You're a total dumbass. This is devastating to our country and to the entire international order.
What struck me about it is you have all of these reports coming out. I've read different articles that, Trump's a Russian asset and so said this, and this is what we know. I'm like, I don't have to read anything that tells me that Trump is aligned with Russia, because I can look at his actions. His actions tell me all I need to know. Tulsi Gabbard in the intelligence, it's just one thing right after the other. But Mark Kelly, what I thought Senator Mark Kelly said, I thought was worth us hearing, because I think it's so true and it makes a great point.
Senator, what's your reaction to where the U.S. stands tonight on this war, which is obviously tougher on Ukraine than on Russia?
Yeah, Anderson, it's shocking, that after 80 years, in a few days, Donald Trump just blew up the Western alliance. I mean, completely. And you have the Secretary of Defense on TV over this weekend talking about how this is a complicated situation. It's not complicated. It's very clear who the aggressor is. It's clear who the war criminal is. And this vote today in the UN, where the United States of America is siding with the North Koreans and with Russia and Belarus, I mean, even after this, first month of this administration, I'm still kind of shocked of what happened over the last, several days. And make no mistake, Anderson, this makes our country look weak, and we are less safe because of it.
By the way,
it just, when you think about what he's done to the military, what he's done on the international stage, I worry. Is the U.S. as strong as it used to be? Are we going to get in some type of conflict that we can't defend ourselves because we have incompetent people from top to bottom, and we're siding with Russia? You've got Elon Musk, who there's no question was talking to Putin for years. The Starlink incident with Ukraine during the Russia-Ukrainian war. Like, this is terrifying stuff. I'm literally alarmed.
It is. I think what's so devastating about all of this, and this is why Macron came over, and you see the Europeans forcefully meeting and talking about how they can help support Ukraine, because Putin has ambitions to charge into all of Europe. And I think they have Donald Trump by the balls. His balls are in a vice grip. I think he is so incredibly compromised. This guy loves to take victory laps. He loves to talk about what a badass he is. Now he's picking fights with the governor of Maine, because that's all he can really do, because Musk and Putin won't allow him to do anything bigger than that. He can't defend the United States of America on the national stage because he's owned and compromised by Musk and Putin. And this is horrific. This is terribly sad. The United States of America voted with our adversaries at the UN, and that is breathtaking.
It really is. And what I find interesting, this next comment from Trump regarding this issue, I have a lot to say about that. So let's play the clip.
Rationale in having the U.S. vote against the UN resolutions that Ukraine proposed and also the U.S. proposed?
I would rather not explain it now, but it's sort of self-evident, I think.
It is self-evident. It is self-evident that Putin is in control of the United States government through Donald Trump, his useful idiot. It is absolutely self-evident that this government will lay down for Putin. It's oligarchy, Putin, Musk's. I don't know what is going on, but I know it is nefarious, and I know it has real world implications, not just for the United States, but for Europe at large.
It's very obvious. I mean, it is very, very obvious that this is a coup. And at first look, you could think it was by Elon Musk, but it seems to be that the president of the United States has been compromised by Russia for the longest time. And I'm ready for the climax. Like, what is it? Do you have the PP tape? Let's roll it out. I mean, let's go. But I think it's even deeper than that. I think Trump is owned by them. I think that we all know he's a terrible businessman. As you always point out, he bankrupted a casino. I think the Russians have bailed him out. I think they have him compromised financially. I think they have him compromised with other, probably provocative style, compromising material, and they own him. And when you see him, his posture sitting next to Macron, how he's slumped over, how emasculated this man looks. And when you see him, when Elon Musk is dominating him in the Oval Office, standing up over him with a kid on his shoulders when the kid wasn't wiping the boogers on the desk, and he's slumped over and sitting there, this man is the weakest American president we have ever seen. And this is terrifying. And I don't know what can be done, but I do know that I want the world to know that tens of millions of Americans see what you are seeing. Mm-hmm. And we do not want to lose our alliances with Western democracies and other, peacemaking countries around the world. This is horrifying for us to watch, that Donald Trump, the president of the United States, is kissing ass to a human rights violator, a thug, voting with North Korea. But this shouldn't be that big of a surprise. This man said during his first term that he was in love with Kim Jong-un, right? And they wrote each other love letters. I mean, so I really just have such disdain for any triple Trumper, because you have agency over the news that you get. And if you just traffic in all this bullshit, people are getting fired. people that just want to live their lives and have a stable job. I was just at the hair salon this morning. The woman sitting next to me, attorney, fired from the FAA.
I've heard
it's widespread.
Well, the last clip I want to leave you with is self-evident, because Donald Trump, who has called Zelensky a dictator, refuses to call Putin a dictator, which we all know Putin is a dictator, a war criminal, murderer, all the things. Here we go.
Zelensky a dictator. Would you use the same words regarding Putin?
I don't use those words lightly. I think that we're going to see how it all works out. Let's see what happens. I think we have a chance of a really good settlement between various countries. And, you're talking about Europe, and you're talking about Ukraine as part of that whole situation. The other side has a lot of support also. So let's see how it all works out. It might work out. Look, you can never make up lives. The one thing you can make up the money, but you can't make up the lives. A lot of lives lost. I think probably a lot more lives than people are talking about. It's been
okay. That's enough. So he will run around and call Zelensky a dictator, but he doesn't use that word lightly when it comes to Putin, and he has absolutely no respect for anything but money. He's sitting there saying a lot of lives were lost. He doesn't give a shit. He doesn't give a shit that unprovoked Russia went in and tried to take over a sovereign nation. He doesn't care, because Putin is his bedfellow, and it is as obvious to me as the nose. It is obvious to me as the nose on my face.
Also, it's insulting to all of our intelligence that he would say that he's so worried about lives lost when he is talking about relocating all Palestinians and developing that into condominiums. Never, not one time has he ever expressed the war crimes from Benjamin Netanyahu to Palestine. Not one time has he ever expressed that. He wants to cherry pick when he cares about lives. What he cares about are Russian lives, because Putin cares about that, because Putin has ambitions to dominate and control the United States of America, and everybody needs to wake up.
Completely agree. Stick with us for more updates. You know me, I love trash talk, and I love when people call Elon Musk names that are well-deserved. And so Senator Tina Smith says, I bet a lot of people have an experience like this with the bad boss. There's an email in your box on Saturday night saying, prove to me your worthiness by Monday or else. I'm sick. I'm on the side of workers, not the billionaire asshole bosses. Elon Musk responds, consistent with President @ Donald Trump instructions, all federal employees will receive an email requesting to understand what they have done last week. Failure to respond will be taken as resignation. So that's what he sent out to federal employees. So Tina Smith, I read her response. Then she says, this is the ultimate dick boss move from Musk, except he isn't even the boss. He's just a dick. How much do you love Tina Smith?
I have to tell you, it's consistently women.
It is.
That are standing up to this. It is, you see the Maine governor, you see Michelle Obama refusing to go to the inauguration. You see Karen Pence, mother, not going to the inauguration. You see AOC, you see Jasmine Crockett, you see Tina Smith. And this is what the people want. Call him a dick. We need to have some fangs. And it's the women that are standing up, because you know what I think? I think white men are so used to being privileged, they don't know how to fight this.
I completely agree. How they fight it is run around saying masculinity is under attack. Instead of achieving more, being better, they want to attack the people that are surpassing them with skill and education because they are so fragile. I mean, it's just unbelievable. You're right. I noticed it's a stream of women that are standing up, and it cracks me up. Mother standing up. And she's even poked Pence to standing up a little bit.
I have to tell you, I've seen Magic Mike Pence out there with some tweets standing up for Ukraine. He knows. Everybody knows. Everybody knows, unless you listen to Tucker Carlson's dipshit podcast, that Russia started the war. It is a fact. It's not to be argued with. If you're a Putin sympathizer, like apparently the president of the United States, the vice president of the United States, their boss, Elon Musk, and Elon Musk's boss, Vladimir Putin. You have a bunch of dipshit Americans that want to believe that, and it's just so dangerous.
It is so dangerous. Speaking of dangerous, and corruption, as always, is forefront in the Trump administration. So this weekend, Pete Hegseth fired a gazillion Pentagon employees. Trump fired the chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And interestingly enough, and quite dangerous, Pete Hegseth fired JAG officers. Well, why did he do that? So on Fox, he was asked the question, why did you fire these JAG attorneys in the DOJ? I'm sorry, in the Department of Justice.
For people who may not know, I mean, they give advice to the military about what is lawful and what isn't. Not surprisingly, there's been some backlash to those who are worried about their removal. One Georgetown law professor says this: Trump also firing the Army, Navy, and Air Force JAGs. In some ways, that's even more chilling than firing the 4 stars. It's what you do when you're planning to break the law. You get rid of any lawyers who might try to slow you down. Your response to her?
I don't know who Rosa is and what her hyperbole is all about. Ultimately, we want lawyers who give sound constitutional advice and don't exist to attempt to be roadblocks to anything that happens in their spots. What we know about these TJAGs, they're called TJAGs.
So what he said basically is exactly what the person tweeted that is looking at the Department of Defense. We don't want lawyers to stand up and give roadblocks to what we want to do vis-a-vis. If we want to do things that are illegal, we don't want lawyers that will tell us, you can't do that, it's illegal. I mean, he admitted it on Fox News. It's unbelievable.
I mean, here's how I feel about Pete Hegseth. I think the people surrounding him need to do an intervention, and they need to take him to rehab for his alcoholism. And once he's been sober 4 or 5 years, because I think that's about how long it takes for the brain to fully kind of recover from being in remission from alcohol abuse disorder. I think then we can sit down and interview him. Until then, you have a bunch of broken people running the United States of America. Trump, inner childhood trauma, malignant narcissism, titty baby. Elon Musk, untreated drug addict, huge titty baby, insecure as all get out. Pete Hegseth, titty baby. Mama had to go on a tour for him. He's a grown-ass man whose mother scolded him rightfully for his behavior. And that letter was leaked to the press. And then she had to go and say, oh, he's better now, blah, blah. These are the most unqualified, broken titty babies. All of them need to go away. They need to go away and work on themselves, because what we have done is we are now showcasing the mental health crisis that has swept the nation by electing the most fucked up people we possibly can, and then letting them appoint even more fucked up people. I don't even mention like Kash Patel, Pam Bondi, or the governor of Kristi Noem. That woman who wears all those costumes all the time. I mean, it would be hilarious if they were just it would be hilarious if they were just running for office. These people are in charge of the United States of America. It is in all of this bullshit from Elon Musk that he saved all this money. This is a lie. It is a bold-faced lie. All he has done is stop investigations into himself and to his companies, and cleared the way for his companies to rape and pillage taxpayer dollars more and more and more.
That's exactly right. That's exactly what he's doing. And whenever I think about the people around Trump and the people that advise him, and he and J.D. Vance, I think it makes the island of misfit toys look like the greatest thing on earth. I mean, these people are bottom feeders. They could no more serve in an Obama administration, even a George Bush administration. I mean, these people are profoundly underqualified, and they want to run around saying DEI hire. This is the most, if you're incompetent, come on over. We got a job for you.
It's like it's a prerequisite. The more screwed up you are, and maybe that's because they're compromised, and maybe that's how Musk and Trump, hang on to them, or maybe they're just all so broken into this alternate universe together. I don't know, but this is embarrassing. If people listen to Pete Hegseth and they think, yep, he should be in charge, it just reveals, number one, how stupid that person is that would think that. Number two, how broken this country is, that we no longer value facts and putting smart people. For me personally, when I go to a doctor, I take comfort in the fact that that person is smarter than me regarding the human body. And that person has more than a decade, more than 2 decades of schooling and rigorous testing to treat me. As such, I want the people in charge of the government to have experience. And this whole notion that, and there's a lot of Republicans that think this, if somebody's rich, they're smart and successful. And this whole notion in capitalism that everything has to be privatized, you're all going to get screwed. You're all going to get screwed by it because corporations seek one thing and one thing only. Look no further than United Healthcare and all of the people that that company has killed by denying, deposing, and defending. You look at all of the deaths there and they don't care. That's what privatization does for you. And that's what all of these people are setting up. It will only benefit the upper class, and everybody below that is going to get killed, harmed, fucked.
Well, they've convinced people that regulations are not consumer protection, that you shouldn't support regulation, which we will all lose in that fight. Moving on to something else a little more petty, because I love to be petty. The Philadelphia Eagles were invited to the White House after their Super Bowl win, and they have declined. And so MAGA is madder than a hornet. So we have Toxic Cowboy posting, Philadelphia Eagles declined to visit the White House. Wish I had known this before the Super Bowl. I wouldn't have wasted my time rooting for them. Eagles fan, your team sucks. And Megyn Kelly, who, boy, she's mad. I mean, she's just raging all the time. She says, same, go F yourself, Eagles. My husband is a fan, so I got on board, but F this BS. Why is Megyn Kelly so mad all the time?
I've personally never seen any sort of a rational thought or anything from her. But what I have to say about the Philadelphia Eagles is good for them. And it's important to point out that Jalen Hurts, the quarterback, when he was asked, what do you think about Donald Trump coming to the Super Bowl? He looked right in the camera and said he can do whatever he wants. He was polite enough about it. But obviously, Jalen Hurts is a black man. He knows what we all see. And we all see all this DEI talk and all of this bullshit from MAGA. We know what their default setting is. We know what white people think about black football players and black basketball players. Entertain me and then shut the fuck up. We know it, and Jalen Hurts knows it, and good for him. And also of note, Jalen Hurts is managed by an entirely female team. This is what real masculinity is. Propping up marginalized, competent people and not being afraid of somebody that doesn't look like you and is not the same gender of you. This whole notion of these, like Jesse Waters, constantly talking about masculinity. If you're on the defense, constantly having to defend how masculine you are, I have news for you. You're not masculine at all, and it makes us all think you're probably a closet homosexual.
Exactly. And when asked about his all-female management team, Jalen Hurts said, I chose the most qualified people. I didn't go into their race or sex. And I was like, good for him. Okay, one last thing. Trump, shockingly, is grifting from the Oval Office. He is monetizing his Gulf of America t-shirts, Make Greenland Great Again, and he has new black edition with different font, Make America Great Again hats. Like, so the sitting president of the United States is grifting. He's making executive orders, then he's grifting off them as a shock to no one. Donald Trump is the first president that's ever done that. And that, to me, says it all.
It's flea market, riffraff, knick-knack, white trash in the White House. It is the white trash, White House, flea market, riffraff, knick-knack bullshit. And for all the triple Trumpers out there, this is your guy. Die on this hill. Do it. Swing for the fences. Whenever you have a gay kid we'll be sitting right here. Whenever you have a trans grandchild that everybody wants to bully, we'll be sitting right here. Whenever your darling child falls in love with a black man and makes beautiful mixed babies, and that people are racist towards your grandchild, we'll be sitting right here. When Donald Trump and Elon Musk fire you after you triple Trump voted for them, and you have benefits, you worked for the federal government for 15 or 20 years, you see how ruthless and psychotic these people are, we'll be sitting right here. I want all of them to know we're going to be sitting right here, and we don't change. And we don't have to be impacted by something for us to care about it. So y'all can go play with Trump, and you can triple Trump it and do all your shit and buy the flea market shit, white trash it. We're all going to be sitting here fighting the good fight and finding good trouble, because that's what progressive policies are about.
It's a perfect way to end it. Stick with us.
I'm surprised they're so woke. I didn't realize I was muted.
Hello again,
that whole
everyone.
time.
Tom Nagorski in the Cipher Brief virtual studio.
I've had
a
it.
Conversation today about the seismic changes happening across the geopolitical landscape. We're running out of ways to describe this here, and we're going to get to some of the questions that it all poses for Ukraine and for Russia. We're delighted to be joined today by Max Boot, a Washington Post columnist, senior fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations, and should note, an acclaimed author. His latest book, Reagan, His Life and Legend, was put on one of the best top 10 lists I think that exists, the top 10 books of 2024 at the New York Times. Max, I know you're very busy. It's great of you to join us. And as I alluded to, it's kind of hard to know where to begin these days, especially the last couple of weeks. But I want to start with kind of a big step back question. You're a historian, among other things. When we look back at these early days of the Trump administration, these last couple of weeks in particular, is it too much, or is it appropriate to think that we will look back at this moment as one where the nearly 8-decade-long transatlantic alliance started to unravel?
It certainly feels like it. I mean, it's hard to know the exact significance of these events because we're just still in the moment, and it's kind of an overwhelming amount of change that we're experiencing just in the last month or so. But it certainly seems like the end of the American-led world order, a testing of American alliances and relationships, the kind we've never seen since 1945, and it's certainly putting at risk the transatlantic relationship, which has been the basis of international security ever since the end of World War II.
Yeah, even that is an enormous statement you've just made. In the wake of all these things, or as they're unfolding, we see and we hear a lot from the Europeans, their leaders, they're having meetings, they're making speeches, they're making pledges, really all seem to be focused on going it alone in some fashion, whether from a security or other standpoint. We were struck by what the soon-to-be Chancellor of Germany, Friedrich Merz, said on Sunday, I think just after his election, pledging that it would move for real independence, I think was his phrasing, from the United States. How do you gauge the possibility and the ability of the major powers in Europe to go it alone from a security standpoint?
I mean, I think it'll be very hard in the short term because the U.S. and Europe are so closely interlinked from a security standpoint, and the U.S. military, remains the most powerful in the world. It'll be very hard for the Europeans to guarantee their own security, especially in the face of this growing Russian threat, without the American backstop. So I hope I hope that the U.S. does not abandon Europe altogether, but it's clear that Europeans are realizing they have to make provisions for their own security. And so you see Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister of the UK, talking about substantially raising UK defense spending. You're seeing across Europe increases in defense spending. It's been basically going on nonstop for the last 9 years, but accelerating now, obviously, because of the Russian threat and with Trump in the White House. I think you're going to see a greater debate about independent nuclear deterrence. I think you're already starting to see some of that in Germany, You've already seen some of that in South Korea. I think that's going to be a more widespread response from American allies because they have relied on the U.S. for our nuclear umbrella for many, many decades. And I think in the current climate, they're not sure they can continue to rely on us. And so it makes sense that countries would have to make provisions for their own security. And that includes the ultimate provision, which is nuclear deterrence. And that's not something that the U.S. has traditionally wanted to see. We have not wanted to see nuclear proliferation, but I think it may happen if we continue to send signals that we are not a trustworthy ally.
The future of national security is here. Introducing the Cypher Brief's NatSec Edge Conference, June 5th through 6th, 2025 in Austin, Texas. Join leaders from intelligence, defense, private industry, and investment as they explore the innovations shaping tomorrow's world. Gain critical insights, connect with top minds, and shape the future of security in an interconnected world. Don't just witness the future, be a part of it. Secure your spot now at natsekedge.com.
Now, for the moment, they are just that, signals, although they're pretty profound signals, not least the vote the other day at the United Nations, where there was the United States sitting with Russia, refusing to call Russia's aggression. You and others have alluded, though, to the possibility, which is out there, that President Trump may change his tune. He might, I think you said, veer back towards Ukraine. Do you view that as just his nature being volatile and unpredictable? I mean, again, these are pretty big markers he's put down. What scenario do you foresee under which he might make a shift like that?
Well, I think the big scenario would be if Washington and Kiev can reach agreement on some kind of minerals deal that Ukraine can live with, and that will give Trump the sense that the U.S. has a financial investment in Ukraine's future, because he is obviously an extremely transactional guy, and appealing to him based on transatlantic unity or common security or the need to protect freedom and democracy, that's not going to get you very far. But if he feels like there's money to be made in it, perhaps he will see that as being something that's worth protecting. I mean, Ukraine can kind of half-jokingly say, we'll give you the rights to all the minerals in Russian territory. You just have to send U.S. troops to go and get them. But so far the actual negotiations have been, very, very concerning, because President Trump issued a demand for Ukraine to basically provide $500 billion, which would make it impossible for its economy to function, and would denude it of the funds it needs to maintain its state and to maintain its defense. And what the signals we're getting are that perhaps the U.S. side has backed off some of that, and perhaps they can reach a deal. And if they do, Trump is nothing if not unpredictable. So, he may look like he's veering towards Russia one day, maybe the next day we'll see something else. But certainly the recent actions that we're seeing, which are calling into commitment U.S. backing for Ukraine, I think are something that's very concerning. And I think Ukrainians are very worried about that, and rightly so, because even though the Europeans have committed more overall aid than the U.S. has been the single largest donor of military aid to Ukraine, and it'll be very hard for Ukraine to survive without any contribution at all from the U.S.
So you're getting to my next question, which you wrote about in the Washington Post the other day, painting, if I have it right, a scenario where there's a deal that is just not acceptable for the Ukrainians. They choose to keep fighting, and the question of whether they could keep doing that without the American assistance. And I think the phrase you used there, if I have it right, Max, was it would be grim but not impossible. Explain what you meant by that.
Well, I compared the situation in Afghanistan to the situation in Ukraine. And of course, in Afghanistan, the U.S. pulled all of our troops out pursuant to a Trump negotiated deal, and the result was a very rapid collapse of the government in Kabul, which had very little popular support, and which also, did not have weapons manufacturing capacity of its own. I think the situation is quite different. In Ukraine, where President Zelensky has solid support of more than 50% of the population, and the vast majority, with very few exceptions, the people of Ukraine want to be an independent country. They don't want to be under Kremlin domination. And so they have been willing to fight for 3 years now, and they will, by every indication, continue to fight. And they've also built up a substantial homegrown armaments industry. I mean, they produced more than 1.5 million drones last year. That's a very impressive achievement, and drones are now becoming the primary weapon system that is being used on the front lines in Ukraine. So Ukraine does have some capacity to defend itself. By some estimates, they produce domestically about 40% of the weapons they need. And the Europeans also provide quite a bit of weaponry. In fact, last year, the Europeans provided more in the way of military aid than the U.S. did. And Europe has very rapidly ramped up its production of artillery shells and other vital components. I think the Europeans are expecting to produce something like 2.5 million artillery shells this year. So all of that combines to mean that Ukraine is not going to collapse within a handful of months, as Afghanistan did, even if U.S. aid is cut off. But certainly, over the medium term, it's going to become a very close-run thing because Ukraine does depend on the U.S. for things like Patriot missile interceptors, which are not manufactured anywhere else. It also depends, by the way, on the Starlink satellite internet service, which could easily be cut off by Elon Musk. So there are a lot of risks and dangers here. I think one wild card, so to speak, is the 300 billion or so in frozen Russian assets that the Europeans control. In theory, the Europeans could just turn that over to Ukraine, and perhaps that money could be used to buy weapons from the United States. I mean, these are all kind of worst case scenarios, but I think we need to be thinking about worst case scenarios right now.
Yeah. What, by the way, is in the pipeline, in your understanding? Biden administration pledges for military aid. I think I read somewhere that they might be, the Ukrainians might, in terms of U.S. supplies, be okay for the next sort of 8-10 months or so. Is that your understanding?
That is my understanding.
Yeah. So here's a question that A++, if you can answer this one, which is, why do you think Donald Trump is doing this? Yes, he's volatile. Yes, he's unpredictable. We also know that he styles himself as a deal maker, and he's talked a lot about wanting a Nobel Prize, whether for this or the Middle East or I guess anything. But there is, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to understand that there's a lot of, as you've just alluded to, potential here for a really, really, really bad deal that goes south under his watch. That's a long way of asking, what do you believe his game is here?
Well, I think you spelled it out. I mean, he wants to do a deal to end the Ukraine war, and quite honestly, I think everybody would love to see a deal that ends the Ukraine war as long as it does not compromise Ukrainian sovereignty or subject Ukraine to Russian domination. I think most of all the Ukrainians want a deal to end the war because they're the ones who are suffering and dying. So, if he can actually pull off an equitable end to the war that does not undermine Ukrainian freedom or democracy, I think he deserves that Nobel Peace Prize. But we're a long way from here to there. Yeah. And I have not seen strong signals from Putin that he is willing to stop his war of aggression, because he has been making some gains on the ground. And it's going to be much easier for Trump to coerce Ukraine, our ally, than it will be for him to coerce Putin, an adversarial power. What does he say or do to convince Putin to stop fighting? I think that's going to be the major challenge. And I will say, Trump is capable of walking away from a bad deal. It's not necessarily foreordained that he will agree to something awful, because remember, when he was negotiating with Kim Jong-un, and Kim offered a so-called denuclearization deal that didn't actually denuclearize, but that would have resulted in the lifting of U.S. sanctions. This was at the Hanoi summit in 2019. Trump walked away from the table. It wasn't a good deal, and he didn't take it. So it's quite possible that he could still walk away. I think everything is in flux, but I think it is a very concerning situation because everything is in flux, and the outcome could be very good or it could be very bad. And at this point, it's just very hard to know how it's going to go.
Yeah, and it's hard to write a column every day that makes sense.
Yes, it is.
Well, Max Boot, you're good to make the time for us at the Cipher Brief. Max Boot, Senior Fellow at the Council of Foreign Relations, columnist at the Washington Post. Thanks so much for being with us.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Something's going on between Tucker and Dan Crenshaw. Rob, play the clip with Dan Crenshaw. A little bit awkward. He's doing an interview with a guy, and then all of a sudden, with GBN, they're talking, and he whispers something about Tucker if he was to run into him. Go ahead, Rob.
Have you ever met Tucker?
We've talked a lot. If I ever meet him, I'll probably kill him.
If I ever meet him, I think kill him.
What did he say?
If I ever meet him, he goes, I think kill him. No joke.
So let me ask you, who leaked this clip?
It's probably
this looks like a direct angle of the camera.
Yeah, it's this guy.
So then this is GBN.
If you, in Crenshaw's defense, if you ask him straight up, like,
or at GBN.
hey, what
By
do you
the
think
way,
of Tucker
whoever
Carlson?
that's
He'd
at
probably
GBN
still
that was
say
behind
it.
If the guy didn't get fired, then it's GBN. Because if somebody leaked the clip here without my permission, and if they have a job, and you leak this, you don't have a job. So that means GBN approved a clip like this being leaked or was okay with it being leaked because it was publicity, getting it out there. So if you ever do an interview with GBN, make sure you don't talk
the lights are on.
while the camera isn't on. Nothing.
GBN?
Just say all the best, whatever. Because now Tucker responds back to this, Rob. If you can pull up, what is that right there you got?
Well, this is possibly why Dan Crenshaw said that he wanted to kill Tucker Carlson.
So, I mean, Dan Crenshaw obviously is not emotionally prepared to lead.
Who's this
anything,
child
and,
Tucker's talking to?
You know, he's out of control. He's out of control, and I think that he's a really volatile person. I hope he gets help. I mean that. And but you know, he's also a pretty sinister person, I would say, whose priorities are not aligned with his party's voters, but also have kind of nothing to do with the United States. So I object. I mean, want to be honest. I feel sorry for Dan Crenshaw. I've had conflict with Dan Crenshaw. I felt like he was emotionally out of control, and so I feel sorry for him. But I also think it's not just him. It's a lot of the leadership of that party just doesn't put the United States first at all. And you know, they all want to suck up to Trump and America first. Really, where's the money going? It's not going here. It's going to the countries whose
this
lobbies
is what he's reacting to. And Tucker
you know,
responds on a tweet, right, Rob? If you can go to that as well.
Tucker calling out Trump right here?
No.
Trump calling out people that are part of MAGA?
Tucker's calling out people from the Rhino side and the establishment Republicans that are trying to kiss up to Trump and saying, but where does the money go to? That's what he's saying. Go a little lower, because I thought there was a tweet by him saying, go a little lower, go a little lower, go a little lower. Apparently it's not up there. Okay, so if you find it, there was something where he said, I would love to have you on. I would love to have you on. I thought I saw a response. I thought I saw a response by Tucker.
Tucker said, if you want to debate, right?
Yeah,
if
you want to
talk
let's
about
do it right here, I'll send you my address.
Yeah.
Something like that is what he said. So, Benny, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, first of all, and me and Brandon were talking about this before the show started. Like Dan Crenshaw.
Is that the one? Let me see it.
Yep.
Why don't you come and sit for an interview, and we'll see how you do. I'll send you my address. Okay, this is a response. And then Elon said, "Why is Crenshaw homicidal regarding Tucker?" Okay, go ahead, Vinny.
Yeah. So okay, and because I know some people are going to get pissed off, and as a veteran, this has nothing to do with his service. He served as I think SEAL Team 3. An IED blew up. I want to say Bahrain. Don't quote me on it, but his eye. He's blinded. He has to wear a patch. The other one was in bad shape, but they fixed it and he can see. All that aside, you have to understand, like there's a difference between Republicans from Dan and Tucker. Okay, Tucker is America first. You guys know that guy. He loves this country. His backbone is in this country. People like Dan Crenshaw, though, Pat, they support. Like they're the military, they're guys that will wear the Ukraine patch. They're about sending the money. They're what did he call him? He called him Eye Patch McCain. He called him Eye Patch McCain.
Tucker called Dan Crenshaw
Tucker called
McCain.
him Eye Patch McCain, and he questions his credibility. While Tucker, he called Tucker a click chaser and a cowardly, know nothing elitist. But I think this is the Republican Party that's fighting each other because it's one is a populist, media-driven America first, and the other one is the establishment that we always talk about. And it's like that's the changing of the guard. The people want more of Tucker, and this is where that beef comes. And there's been a lot. I mean, he was going through it for a while I forgot who reported on the Unusuals, where there's a lot of questions about the investing and insider trading and all that type of stuff, because the investments that he said that he was making, I want to say he's worth $4.4 million now, and he was getting furious online because people were apparently calling him out for his stuff. But I think if they sit down with Tucker will eat him alive.
Brandon.
Yeah. So yeah, just when you listen to somebody speak, I look at their energy and their vibe a lot, and just really the way he speaks, the smugness, the condescending way that he says things. Just that alone, I don't like from the beginning. That was already a red flag. But then, like, the things that he supports, like when he said, he's the first one to come out and support funding the military, first one to come out and endorse Ukraine. So I don't think that he says what he actually thinks. I think that he's one of those guys that's being told what's said. I think he's bitter about things. I think he's trying to chase money because of things. And I don't think he actually says what he thinks. So I can't respect somebody like that.
I don't know too much about this guy, but to say that Tucker Carlson is the worst person ever, I mean, that just blatantly proves that he doesn't know what he's doing. I mean, it's really difficult to hate Tucker Carlson, even from the other side. He's just like a very cheerful, happy-go-lucky person, right? Worst person ever. I mean, right.
I don't know. I think there's a lot of people out there that would like to punch Tucker Carlson in the face. Not me. I'm just saying a lot of people would.
Yeah. Yeah, well, listen, we'll see what happened here. What I like is the fact that the debate's taking place. Now it's on Dan Crenshaw to go out there and sit down with Tucker. There's also things going on between Tucker and Ben, where, there is the Ben camp. There is the Tucker camp. There is the establishment camp. There's the DeSantis camp that's still not happy about what happened with Trump. There's the MAGA camp. Then there's the fractions of the MAGA camp that are all fighting each other. But guess what? They're all still on the same side. That's the part, okay, that they're trying to fight and argue, and the policies at the top that are winning are the policies that Trump has. The Republicans are saying, look, man, you guys are great and whatever you're doing and whoever you're speaking on behalf of, the ideas we support are the ideas that Trump's put up there for us. We're supporting what he has to say. And so that's what I noticed going on within here. This morning I'm reading an article from 2017, Kellogg School. Kellogg is known as one of the best marketing schools out there. Rob, if you can go to the story here. If you can just go to the story, click on the link below.
That's
Watch
at
this
Northwestern,
one here.
is it not?
It's a very, very, very respectful school. Sitting near a high performer can make you better at your job. It's called the spillover from certain coworkers can boost our productivity or jeopardize our employment. What are they saying? Go a little bit lower to read this a little closer. The people we sit near at work inevitably impact our day. They may brighten our mood or drive us crazy. So for me, I have a problem here, right? 25. What's more, our work neighbors can actually change how we do at our jobs. Researchers looked at the 25-foot radius around high performers at a large technology firm and found that these workers boosted performers in coworkers by 15%. That spillover, positive spillover, translated into an estimated $1 million in additional annual profits, according to new research from Dylan Miner, an assistant professor at managerial economics and decision sciences at Kellogg. Now watch this here, how this continues. So 25 feet radius, 15% positive, okay? Watch the opposite. The flip side is that bad eggs impact their neighbors too. Negative spillovers from so-called toxic coworkers is even more pronounced, sometimes having twice the magnitude of impact on profits as positive spillover. Yet while this toxic spillover happens very quickly, it also dissipates almost immediately once that worker is either fired or relegated to the far physical reaches of the company. You can stop with the story here. What is this story about? If you think about a lady this morning, Crystal, who her and I connect a lot, she connected me today to speak to her son, 13-year-old son. I've met him before. So I sent him a message this morning on the drive here, talking to him about what it is to be 13 years old. Yeah, I've been talking to my boys right now about a book I'm reading called Aggressive Girls and Clueless Boys. Every father with boys has to read this book, because nowadays girls are approaching guys about sex and flirting versus it used to be the other way around. We had to. Today, girls are the ones that are more aggressive. If you have a son, do whatever you can. Don't look at the ratings. Just go read this book. It's 80 pages. You must read this book. Every parent, it's very
Don't look at the
necessary for you
ratings
to read this book.
because they're bad.
6 pages. So I'm talking to this kid about one of the most basic things you can do in life at early ages to win is choose your friends wisely. Later on in your career, one of the best things you can do in your life is choose your bosses, the company you work with, and your coworkers wisely. You do, you'll grow. You'll do better. You don't, you'll hate the company. You'll hate your boss. You'll be angry at everybody. You'll be walking on eggshells like, oh my God, I can't believe this. And you're thinking it's you, it's somebody else. Now, don't get me wrong. Some people in life are crap magnets. There are people that purely are crap magnets. They cannot help themselves but constantly attract negativity and problems in your life. You got to do whatever you can to avoid those folks. But if you can simply decide to attract better people in your life can improve in every possible way. Many years ago, I wanted to learn how to be a better networker. There was a guy I would work a room with, and I would watch this guy. I'm like, oh my God, this guy's a great networker. I'd never seen a networker like this before. This guy was a former hairstylist for Diana Ross and Michael Jackson, and he would go into a room, and it was like, boom, he went from this guy to that guy to this guy to this guy to that guy, and then all of a sudden we're in the office of the CEO's room. I'm like, how the hell did this guy do it? Couldn't believe how the guy would network. What's the moral of the story? Networking has changed. There's been an evolution to networking. But for us, I took many of those things I learned many years ago, and I applied it in business, in raising money, in getting in rooms, in getting guests on the podcast, in recruiting folks who became presidents of the company, CTOs, technology investors, raising money. But the ability to network is so critical today because there's an element of networking that's also networking and finding your peer group, your friends. There's 8 mistakes people make when it comes down to networking. Next Tuesday at 3 p.m., Tuesday, March 4th at 3 p.m., I'm going to give you a PDF of the 8 mistakes people make on networking. On this webinar that I'm hosting, you can go to vtwebinar.com to register. Again, vtwebinar.com to register. You're going to get those 8 mistakes. Trust me, you want to know what these 8 mistakes are because it's do's and don'ts that we'll cover on that podcast and that on that Zoom.
Does India have a primary geopolitical adversary? It seems like historically it's tended to be Pakistan, but is it China? Is it someone else? Like, how do they think about that?
Now it's definitely China. I think Pakistan, in term 1 of Modi, it definitely was. But as some of the economic agenda that he's done, I guess as India started to lift off, basically, they stopped seeing Pakistan as a real rival. And simultaneously, Pakistan kind of unraveled. And there's obviously skirmishes in Kashmir, and that's still a sore spot. But I have noticed a lot of Indians, they're thinking about India not necessarily as a foil to Pakistan or as like a rival of Pakistan, but as, hey, how do we build our country up to be a superpower? And how do we rival China? Because China is the one who's definitely going to threaten us. And like I said, I think a lot of people, whether the government or people in general, they're kind of afraid about the military's capability versus China, especially now that China's technology sector, that's definitely coupled with their defense sector, it's just skyrocketed. What is India going to do, when that comes? What is India going to do against China's drone technology or whatever they field in the Himalayas? Or anything they do, really. Can it compete? There's definitely a worry of Indians when it comes to that, but there's a simultaneous ambition that, hey, we need to step our shit up, essentially. We need to get better, and we need to start looking at China eye to eye instead of being, way below them.
I know that they've been increasing their military budgets. It feels like basically everyone around the world is doing that these days. How do they look at the Quad? Because, once again, that's like another thing, simplistic Western view. It's like, oh, it's another military alliance like NATO or something like that. And will be so powerful because it's India and Japan and Australia and the United States. But very explicitly, it was India who pumped the brakes and said, this is not a full-on alliance with, you get attacked, I have to fight. It's much more of a platform cooperation. We'll do some exercises together, but we're not going to go all the way up to that line of being completely and totally aligned with you. So can you talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter too much, but I saw a tweet today of this guy I follow, Indian guy, he's very smart. And he was kind of talking about this. Not necessarily the Quad. I think India was very, gung-ho about the Quad earlier. But as these relations starting to change, one thing he tweeted was, hey, India is not trying to be the Asian Ukraine. They don't want to get dragged into a fight with China that they know they are going to lose. Indians are not confident about fighting China. They're somewhat confident about defending their territory, but going into China is another thing. Sending people to Taiwan is another thing. I think Indians are really focused on let's grow our capabilities, let's grow our economy, let's grow our defense, but we do not want to fight the Chinese people. It seems like there is partially, and it is kind of an admission, I don't know if we could say admission of defeat, but it's an admission of we are not good enough to stand up to China, and we don't want to, antagonize these people a lot.
Hope you're learning a lot from Akshar. I know that I am. I also recently learned that you and I have legal protections against our data being bought and sold by marketers that spam our phones and inboxes. The problem is it's complicated and takes a lot of time to actually get your name off all the lists that corporations buy in order to get your information. Until recently, I didn't think that there was a way out. Then I found Incogni. Once you sign up, they'll show you a dashboard of all the marketing lists that they're working on taking your name off of. So you get to see your name getting taken off of these lists that you didn't even know you were on. I'm signed up for their yearly plan, which means Incogni is constantly monitoring month after month to keep me off of these lists. And I'm already seeing results. Get your information off the databases with the link in my description. You can use the code Watson to get 60% off an annual plan with Incogni, or go to incogni.com/Watson. Is there a split though between parties? Because you see that, and it's obviously Ukrainian lives more so, but to a great degree more so than American lives, but the perspective of the right versus the left in how involved we should be in something like the Ukraine war, how involved or what side we should take, around what's going on in something like Israel. Is there a split BJP versus INC, or some other type of split in terms of people that might be a little bit more let's get muscular, let's get a little bit more antagonistic, versus those who kind of have a more live and let live pacifistic perspective?
In general, I'd say overall, there is actually a foreign policy consensus across even the BJP and the INC when it comes to issues like Ukraine, or when it comes to issues like Russia, the relationship with Russia. Recently, though, there has been some changes. I think this is more fringe stuff. The BJP accuses Rahul Gandhi, the prime leader of the INC, and I guess the opposition, of being in cahoots with the liberal establishment of America. They accuse other people too, but they especially go for Rahul Gandhi, I guess, because he's the biggest one, and they have a bit more dirt on him as well. I think if you really look down at it, something Rahul does that does not help him is he is a dynast. His father was the PM, his grandmother was the PM, his great-grandfather was the PM. Rahul, he's not cut out for politics necessarily. I think other life, he'd just be doing his own thing. He seems like a kind of chill guy, but at the same time kind of entitled because he's been pushed into politics. But Rahul, he does not connect with the average Indian, and something he does is he goes to, say, the UK or random places in Europe or America, and he goes to these college campuses and he just talks crap about India and the Indian government, and he kind of invites pretty much explicitly foreign interference that, hey, America can't stand by while all this stuff is happening in India. You need to put pressure onto the Indian government and XYZ. This type of stuff does not help his brand in terms of being a strong nationalistic or patriotic leader, and it helps with these accusations from the BJP of, hey, this guy is not India first. But he has, I think Rahul even himself has been explicit about the Indian position on Ukraine, that India should remain neutral, they should buy gas or oil from Russia, and whatever the BJP's position is, I think he actually agrees with. So there's more consensus than not, actually. The breaking consensus is, again, a lot of this civil service stuff. How are we going to interface with these NGOs? How are we going to interface with activists and certain domestic policies as well?
The modern history, at least of India, has been this of a general non-alignment, a little bit of swaying back and forth, like you're saying, but never like a hard fastening. The way NATO allies have been really fastened to one another since the early days of the Cold War. Does India have a natural ally though that's just kind of they're always in the same corner? Their interests are tightly aligned, or is everyone kind of in that gray zone?
It seems like the most congruent ally has been Russia / the USSR over, I think, since the independence. It has gotten slightly strained due to, Russia's ties with China and Russia's issues with America. So there's been, slight sparks there. But overall, I think there's a lot of trust with Russia. I think the more interesting allies, though, are these kind of smaller countries that give, I don't know, one or two small, really vital things to India. So like the UAE and Saudi Arabia, it's very ironic.